I was around 6 when it happened. My parents had tucked me in for bed. I live in a rural countryside, so nighttime is very quiet here, no sounds of cars or anything. It's usually very peaceful, and I was laying on my back when suddenly I heard the sound of long nails scratching the wood under my bed. The reason this incident sticks out to me is because I can still remember the feeling of my heart dropping out of my stomach and feeling paralyzed with fear. I was about to call out for my parents when my dad crawled out from under my bed and stood up in the dark, just looking at me. He said, "You forgot to say your prayers," then walked out of my room. I was understandably shocked. I didn't leave my bed afterwards, and I must have fallen asleep at some point. My dad would normally tell me to say my prayers before bed, so this seemed like something that he would say, but I have no idea what would possess him to hide under my bed. My dad denies ever doing this, but I brought it up numerous times over the years, and he has never admitted to doing it. I never really considered until recently, though, that he definitely doesn't have nails long enough to make the deep scratching sound that I heard. But what do you guys think? Maybe I fell asleep and had a vivid dream? I also considered that it could be something paranormal, but I don't know. To answer a few basic questions, though, no, I can't remember if I asked my parents about the incident the next morning, but since then I have asked repeatedly over the last 20-ish years, and my dad has never owned up to it. I believe at this point, though, that my dad couldn't have done it because, well, one, my dad likes scary stuff and would absolutely take credit for a prank that scared me so bad like that. 2, my parents had been gone from my room for probably about 10 minutes before I even heard the scratching. It's possible my dad could have stayed behind, but he could not easily fit under my bed without me noticing, that's for sure. 3, he's not really a drinker, so I doubt that he was passed out on the floor or anything. I'd like to believe that it was just sleep paralysis, like many have theorized. However, that would be my one and only time experiencing it, so that's a bit odd, right? There's definitely a chance that it could have been something more sinister, and it's something that I hope to never, ever encounter again. I am normally pretty skeptical of supernatural things, but there were 3 times where I can definitely say that I saw the Shadow Man commonly referred to as the Hat Man. The first time was when I was 5 or 6. My family was living in a house and my parents had contracted to build, so it was not by any means an old house. One morning, like crack of dawn early, I used to be an early riser. My older brother and I were making toaster strudels, and I don't quite recall the reason that I had wandered into the hall that connected the kitchen to the entryway, but I did, and when I was halfway down the hall, I saw a tall shadow wearing a hat of some kind. It was hovering a few feet off the floor. I screamed and I ran to get my brother, but by the time that we went back to the entryway, it was gone. The second time was at a completely different house, also freshly built as a part of a new subdivision. I was a teenager in high school at the time, and this encounter has less of a story, I guess. I was home alone one night. The lights downstairs were off. The only light on was the upstairs hallway. I got hungry at some stage and went down to get something to eat. As I came back up the stairs, I felt a strange urge to run up them to my room, which was right at the top of the stairs. When I reached the second floor hallway, I chanced to look behind me and I saw the same hat-wearing figure at the bottom of the stairs. Now, with the way the light fell, it could have been my own shadow, but my shadow was on the stairs, and this entity was on the ground floor, again hovering just above the floor. His form was somehow distinct from the darkness of the unilluminated lower floor as well. I promptly entered my room and I decided not to go downstairs until morning. Now, a few years later at a third house, this time the house was a bit older. As it was not built for my parents, they just moved into it. I was living at home after college, and again, one late night, I went downstairs to get a late night snack. Not being as familiar with the house, I did turn the lights on to navigate to the kitchen. Turning them back off as I went back upstairs, I once again felt the urge to run up the stairs. Turning around at the top once again, I saw a shadow of a man in a hat. I looked away, then back, and when I did, he was gone. Now, I haven't seen him since then, and now that I live at my parents' newest house, I wonder if I ever will again. It's another one that they had built, and I've only seen this entity those 3 times. Each time was late at night or early morning, all different houses owned by my parents, and always by the front door, always a shadow in a hat. I specify my parents own the houses because I never saw it at my friends' houses when I stayed over, or in hotels or on vacations or anything. I didn't see it at either of my apartments in college, nor while I briefly lived with my grandmother or at the apartment that I lived in last year. It wasn't until I recently learned of the Hat Man, a paranormal entity apparently seen by many in the world, with eerily similar descriptions, despite no relation or contact between those who saw it, that I've put everything together and I now know this figure as the Hat Man. I'm still researching and learning about this topic, but if you've got anything to add, then I would love to hear it. I once held a hunting lease in Middle Georgia. It was an abandoned hunting camp that hadn't been used in several years. I'm not superstitious at all, but this place was legitimately spooky. It was miles down an overgrown dirt road and completely surrounded by woods. It's probably the most secluded place that I've ever been. I used to hunt there by myself a lot, and there was always this weird sense that I wasn't alone out there. There was a locked gate at the front of the property, but it was not uncommon for us to find the front door of the cabin open, even when the door was locked. That was pretty creepy, but that's not what this story is about. One evening, I was hunting down in a small valley by a food plot that we put lining a creek that bordered the property at. From the minute that I sat down, I had a weird feeling, like I wasn't in a safe place even though I was holding a gun with ballistic-tipped rounds. I just didn't feel like I was the top predator out there, if you know what I mean. I didn't see any deer while I was sitting at the stand, but the forest was abuzz with activity that day. Birds, squirrels, and other critters singing their normal evening symphony. And then, all of a sudden, just silence. Everything just stopped. It felt like everything in the woods was just looking right at me, too. It was getting dark fast anyways, and I was obviously extremely creeped out by that, so I packed up my gear and started the walk back up to the cabin. About 100 yards away, I had this feeling that something was coming up behind me. I spun around and pointed my rifle back down the pathway towards the food plot, and that was when I saw it. There was something standing in the middle of the path. It wasn't a person, but it didn't look like a deer or anything that I've seen before. There was hardly any light to make out any features, but it almost looked like some kind of bipedal deer or something. It was just standing there, staring at me too. I quickly made my way back up to the cabin, packed my stuff up, and I just got out of there. I just let the lease run out, and after that, I never went back there. Can you name every single subscription you have? I know I can't name all of mine, and I'm not alone as well, because I just learned that over 74% of people have subscriptions that they've forgotten about. But with Rocket Money, I don't have to remember every subscription or worry about forgetting any, because now I can see them all laid out right in front of me. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. Rocket Money's dashboard gives you a clear view of your expenses across all of your accounts. Easily create a personalized budget with custom categories to help keep your spending on track. See your monthly spending trends in each category to know exactly where your money is going. Get alerts if bills increase in price, there's unusual spending activity, or if you're close to going over budget. The new goals feature automatically saves money for you without you having to even think about it. Whether your goal is to pay off credit card debt, put away money for a house, or just build your savings, Rocket Money makes it easy. I've saved my own fair share of cash using Rocket Money to cancel a few subscriptions that I didn't even remember that I had. one of which was a D&D map-making subscription that I'd completely forgotten about and was still paying for on a monthly basis. Finding this made me question whether or not I had other subscriptions that I had forgotten about too, and it was awesome to finally have that peace of mind knowing that I wasn't forgetting anything any longer. Rocket Money will even try to negotiate lower bills for you, sometimes by up to 20%. They automatically scan your bills to find opportunities to save, then you can ask them to negotiate for you. And they'll deal with customer service. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in cancelled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. So, stop wasting money on things that you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/scared. That's rocketmoney.com/scared. rocketmoney.com/scared. Last year, I started law school in Los Angeles. I have never lived in a big city before, and I was really excited to be in a massive city with over 4 million people. Ever since I was little, I always knew that I had a half-sister in LA, but my parents had this weird anger toward her that always made me feel like a taboo topic, I guess. Of course, I had looked her up on social media and I knew what she looked like, but that was about all. We had never actually met, and she was never that active on social media, so there wasn't a lot that I could see anyway. But out of nowhere one day in my first year of law school, I got a friend request on Facebook from my sister. Her profile seemed legitimate, and she had Facebook friends, and her profile picture looked like her. She sent me a message inviting me to a little dinner party at the park with her friends. We could finally meet each other for the first time. I was new to LA as well, still sort of am, and had no idea which parts of the city to avoid at night. I was really excited about that idea though, but I also had a lot of anxiety about it too. It would be nice if we had met, totally clicked, and became besties for life. But what if we ended up sobbing like we were in some dramatic movie scene? What if I tried to talk with her and she just didn't click with me, and she started showing me an attitude? Or worse, what if it's all going well until we have some kind of disagreement? Someone said something hurtful, and then we were both crying in front of everyone. Honestly, if she had suggested a cozy little bakery for desserts instead, I probably would have gone. But going to a park with other people just didn't feel right. I thought that it was like such a precious moment that I didn't want to have it in front of all these other people. I couldn't bring myself to go, in fact. I didn't want to have to risk having a meltdown in front of all these other people. I was worried about how messy it would get. Anyway, a few weeks later I googled that park just to see what it was like. Maybe we could meet up there together, just one-on-one after all. And that's when I learned that something was wrong. I won't say the name of the park, but anyone who has lived in LA for long enough will tell you that it's not a safe place for girls to be having a dinner party at night. The area surrounding that park has very high violent crime rates. It's controlled by gangs. Even people who do illegal business in that park are forced to pay a tax to the gang in exchange for being left alone. So now, I was really concerned, but also curious. I actually tried to get a hold of my sister myself. She was an undergrad at the time at a local college. I had a friend who went to her school. I asked my friend to reach out to her on campus and ask her if she'd be okay with meeting us. They connected and the three of us met at my friend's house. And thankfully it was great. We got along really well. My friend was also very happy to do that for us. The three of us had a lot of fun. We weren't bursting in tears, but we let out a few, and we had dinner, we watched a movie, and we spent the night at my friend's house. And when I told my sister about that whole thing, she said that she hadn't used Facebook since like high school. So clearly somebody was impersonating her. I would have told her to have reported the fake account, but unfortunately, it had already been deleted. She knew that she had been impersonated on social media though. Another one of her friends had been scammed by someone pretending to be her, and it was some scheme involving fake concert tickets or something like that. Someone, though, had been impersonating my sister. They knew that I was in town, and they literally tried to lure me into one of the most dangerous parts of LA at night. I still have no idea what their actual motives were, but I don't know if I even want to find out, to be honest. I mean, that's a very, very scary thought. Meeting my sister after all these years was a beautiful thing, but the whole backdrop, it was terrifying. This happened 4 years back. It was the middle of winter and the night was unseasonably warm, without a hint of snow on the ground. I left my apartment at around 8 p.m. to go for my daily walk. I worked night shifts and my schedule was pretty messed up, hence the 8 p.m. walk, figuring that I would cross the bridge into the city nearby. For further context, I'm a pretty tall guy who's fairly athletic, and I was in my late 20s at this moment. I'd rarely had a problem walking at night, and at the time I felt safe to do so. So I put my headphones in and I headed towards the bridge. The first 20 minutes were uneventful. I passed by old houses, a subpar Mexican restaurant, a really good Mexican restaurant, a sketchy gas station, and some newly built upscale apartments. And finally, I was at the river, enjoying the view of the bright lights over the dark flowing water, not yet frozen. I crossed the bridge into the city and hit a crosswalk button at a four-way intersection, and then noticed someone standing on the corner opposite, the only other soul I'd seen outside of that night. Seemingly, she was doing nothing, and I assumed that she was waiting for an Uber to come and pick her up, since she didn't seem to be waiting for the light to change. The street, ordinarily busy during the daytime, was now silent. The light changed and I crossed, heading in her direction. As I neared her, I noticed that she would cast glances in my direction and then sort of look away, almost sheepishly. She did this multiple times, and I figured that she was just unnerved by me. I sympathized with that, figuring that it must have made her uneasy, us being the only two people on a dimly lit street like this. As I passed by, I took in her outfit, mostly because I thought that she looked cold. She wore a knitted hat with tassels, a sweater that looked too thin for the winter, tight jeans, and a little plastic children's backpack on her back. I thought that she was in her teens at first, but upon closer inspection, she appeared to be in her late 20s or maybe even early 30s. She had short cropped light brown hair and a pale complexion. She was skinny and was of average height. I was maybe a head taller than her, I would guess. But I walked by and continued down the street without much more of a thought. I passed by high-rise hotels on my right and left and made my way into a central park. During peak hours, this place would be packed with tourists and locals alike, but that day, at an odd hour and with the pandemic in full swing, I felt like the only man in the city. I admired the brilliant display of lighted trees as I crossed through the center of the park, and then, figuring I was at a good halfway point in my journey, I made my way around an old marble and stone library back towards the bridge. As I turned the corner of the library back into the street from which I'd come, I nearly collided with someone moving towards me. It was that same woman that I'd seen not even 10 minutes earlier. My noise-cancelling headphones were still on, so I pulled down one side and said something by way of apology. But she said nothing in return. Instead, she sort of backed away from me and stood below a streetlight, not making eye contact. She stole tiny glances at me, that same tick that I'd noticed before. I put my headphones back on, nodded a good night, and I headed towards the nearest crosswalk. Reason told me that she must have been headed in the direction that I'd come from, since we'd nearly run into each other headed the opposite ways, but some part of me whispered that she wasn't headed that way. And sure enough, when I turned to look, she was trailing close behind me, her strides surprisingly long and energetic. I found this odd enough that I continued to watch her out of the corner of my eye. Shortly after I reached the crosswalk, as I stood there waiting for the light to change, she caught up with me, passed me by, and stopped. A car went past, and as it did so, she squatted over her plastic bag a few meters from me, rifling frantically for something, looking up at me on occasion. I hit a button on my headphones, stopping my podcast so that I could hear her better, What I found disturbing about the motion of her looking through her bag is that it struck me as, well, fake, as though she were pretending for some reason. She was barely looking inside, and her careless motion struck more like bad acting. Something about her motions and the way that she kept looking at me felt wrong. The light changed and I began to walk quickly, but she was faster. She stood suddenly, darting past me towards the museum, swinging the half-open little pink backpack over her shoulder. I watched her silhouette disappear into the darkness beyond the reach of the streetlights. I honestly hoped that that was the end of it, and after a few beats of not seeing her, I let my guard down a little bit, restarting my podcast. Now, beyond the museum was a patch of poorly lit sidewalk, in front of a squat building with mirror-like windows. I wasn't far from the bridge now, and as I made my way back there, I turned my head to look at the reflections of the buildings and the streetlights in the windows. And to my horror, a dark figure sprinted silently towards my reflection, dreamlike. I'm not sure why, but maybe out of sheer confusion, I turned to meet her as she hurtled towards me. Perhaps surprised by my sudden turn, she halted mere feet from me, staring, her eyes wide and looked frantic and wild. She kept looking at my arms, then back at my face, as though almost sizing me up. My accidental bluff had worked, and in the darkness I suppose I must have looked more prepared to fight back than I felt. But she gripped something small tightly in one hand. Though she held it off to the side and in the shadow of the building, I could see what it was. Seconds dragged as we stood there staring at one another. Immobilized by fear and confusion, I waited for her to make some move, to attempt to use whatever object she held in her hand. And just then, to my enormous relief, a car trundled slowly past us. A bit of my strength returned, and over my blaring podcast, I felt more than heard myself shouting at her, "What do you want?" No reply. I slowly backed away from her, expecting her to move, but she just watched me, that same intense look on her face. I took another step back, then another, steadily backing away from her until I felt confident enough to turn and carefully walk away. As I reached a better lit area, I began to move more quickly, all the while keeping my eyes trained on her shadowy form. She stood there for some time, statuesque in fact. Then, abruptly having spontaneously abandoned whatever plan that she may have had for me, she turned from me and, without looking for traffic, she crossed the street with long strides and disappeared around the corner of a building. Something about the casual air of it, though, just really disturbed me. I kept my eyes trained behind me on my walk home, afraid that she would follow me. The bridge was well lit, and I saw no sign of her, knowing that this was the only way for her to follow me and keep up on foot. I breathed a sigh of relief. I saw no more cars headed from the city, no more pedestrians out walking. Thankfully, nothing happened after that. I'm not sure why, but I didn't call the cops that night. I still regret having not called, despite my roommates insisting that I do so. I just remember sort of thinking that I wasn't sure what to say to the cops, that I hadn't really been attacked, I guess, that they wouldn't be able to find her anyway. I made up excuses, I guess, but I suppose I must have been in shock maybe, in denial at having been nearly ambushed, especially by someone smaller than me, in my own city, so close to my apartment. One of my roommates called the cops for me, though, and a cop did drive through the area, but by that point, she was gone. So I live in the southwest of the UK, and years ago, when I was around 17, this would have been about 15 years ago, I think, I got kicked out by my mum, who I was living with, because we had an argument. I wandered the streets that night, trying to stay awake. I asked friends if I could stay with them, but that wasn't an option, unfortunately. At the time, I lived in a relatively new suburban area, so I decided to walk into the nearby woods that overlooked some farmland, hoping to watch the stars and find a place to sleep. This was at around 2 in the morning. There was a large wooded area near some flats, and I crawled through a thicket which led to an open space. As I walked through, it was pitch black, and I thought that this would be a nice, safe area to try and sleep at. As I lay down, suddenly I heard footsteps, though. They sounded heavy and loud, and it sounded like they were circling me. I froze and asked if somebody was there. The footsteps got faster and faster, pacing around me. Then I heard a deep growl, and whatever it was, it sounded big. I panicked and ran away through that same thicket and back onto the street. At the time, I had about £100 in my bank account, so I wandered to a nearby hotel to see if I could get a room, but they wouldn't let me in. I was cold, desperate, and scared, so I walked to a nearby 24-hour shop, bought some snacks, a torch, and I made my way back to the thicket, and this time I was armed with light. When I returned to the woods, I heard the footsteps again. I quickly turned on the torch, shining it all around, looking for where the footsteps were coming from, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard the growl again, and it was deep and reverberating. It sounded like it was right next to me. I could hear it, but I couldn't see it, but whatever it was, it sounded big. And no matter how much I shone that torch around, I just could not see what was making the noise. I ran away to a nearby bus stop, and I spent the night there awake but scared, and spent my night there too. The next day, I met up with a friend and I told her what had happened, and I wanted to investigate, so me and her went to go through that thicket and into that open place, and she was scared after the story that I told her, but it was daylight. I went in again and she stayed outside, but I heard the growl again, really loud and really close. But it was daylight this time, and I could hear it but not see it anywhere. I know that this sounds crazy, but believe me, it scared the absolute living daylights out of me, and nobody believes what I witnessed. And really, I don't blame them, because I wouldn't believe it if somebody told me too. But if you have any similar stories, then please do let me know, because I would love to hear them, and know that I'm not the only one who has experienced something like this. This happened a few hours ago. So in my town, there's a story that a guy has moved into the deep woods close to our town. I never believed it, as I go for night drives occasionally, and I've never seen him or anything resembling a man that lives in the woods. Anyway, tonight I decided to go for a drive and drove past a pizza place. Being hungry, I decided to get a pizza before I went home. In my head, I had a plan to eat the pizza and play some Minecraft, as I'm in my 2-week Minecraft phase at the moment. I paid for my pizza and started walking to my car with the pizza in one hand and my phone in the other hand, messaging my friend if he wanted to play some Minecraft when I got home. I look up from my phone to cross the road to the car park, and I see something under my car. It looks like a shadow or something dark. I put my phone in my pocket and pull out my keys. I unlock the car to scare off anything close to the car. I was thinking that it could be a cat or a dog just sort of hanging around my car, but when I unlock the car, nothing happens. No cat running away and nobody running away. The shadow looked like it was cast from the driver's side, so I was going to have to look at whatever it was, whether I wanted to or not to get in. I put my keys away and pull out my phone again and turn the flashlight on to see better in the dark. And as I turn towards the driver's side of my car, I see him. A dirty, naked man with big eyes staring right at me. He was crouched down trying to hide from me, and now, I don't usually get scared of anything really, but this guy terrified me. He looked like he had rolled around in mud and it had dried out his skin. His eyes looked creepy, bloodshot and kind of bulging out of his head, and obviously he was completely naked. I get startled and sort of jumped backwards out of instinct, dropping my pizza in the process. It falls out of its box and onto the floor. I start moving back slowly and shout at him to get away from my car. He looks up at me and then at the pizza, then back at me again. He tilts his head to one side and then jumps towards the pizza like a dog, grabs it, and starts running away down the road, and I assume that he ran all the way to the woods. I wouldn't know where he went as I didn't feel like following him, but he definitely was in those woods somewhere. I lock my car and run back to the pizza place, and I just stay there for a bit. The workers obviously don't believe me when I tell them what had happened, but I know what I saw. Once the fear subsides after a while, I realize that this guy just stole my pizza. Angry as I was looking forward to it, I decided to get another one and run to my car this time. I get in and put the pizza in the passenger seat, and then I just go home. Once I got home, I locked all of my doors and windows. I even locked my bedroom door as I feel a little bit scared still. I think that I'll be playing Minecraft until the sun comes up. This entire scenario happened a few years ago when I used to take walks alone, occasionally at night, which is something that I thought very little of since I lived in a heavily residential wealthy area. In other words, on the trail I'd frequent, houses were always within sight. On one such night, shortly into my walk, I see a figure walking a few 100 feet behind me, something that I knew immediately was pretty odd, considering it was around 10 at night at the time. At first, I discounted this thought, since it was a public trail, and they could have very well been doing the exact same thing as me, just going for a walk. I continued on for roughly 5 to 10 minutes or so before looking behind me once more, only to find the same person still trailing me. Keep in mind that at this point, I'd gone through a few turns by now on the trail, meaning that it was becoming more and more unlikely that this person just so happened to be going to the same location. I decided to take odd paths and directions, turning off into the gravel and weirder, more roundabout side areas, and they still followed me. By the time that I was reaching the apex of my journey, passing by the local park, they were maybe less than 60 feet behind me, a distance that they could easily have covered in seconds. It's then that I decided to call my family. I had researched for this, I knew what to do, and believe it or not, the call, it didn't go through. As it turns out, my phone was a recent gift, and its service had been set up improperly, meaning that no matter how many times I frantically called in that moment, nothing would happen. In a decision I call back to as one of my best to this day, I acted as if the call had gone through, and was on the phone with my mum, miming out and talking audibly about my location and the person behind me, beginning to briefly describe them. Even in the act, I wasn't able to really do so, but as I could never get a proper view of their face, as if it was somehow shrouded in something, I did my best with what I had. And sure enough, when I turned around again, they were nowhere to be seen. And not that they had turned off and walked in another direction, but it was as if they weren't there to begin with. Weeks later, my mum told me that a police officer had come into her work and warned about abductions that had been happening in our area, specifically for child trafficking and organ trade. Well, I count myself as very lucky, and whenever I leave the house now, I am very aware, only doing so during the day, while taking a large knife with me too. There was a point later on in that neighborhood that a car clearly followed me, turning around in a cul-de-sac where there was no logical reason for them to be except for me. But this was the most obvious example of, well, an attempted kidnapping. This is a bit of a long one, but I think about it once in a blue moon, and I wanted to share it somewhere so that it would be permanent. I thought others might be interested too, so I thought that I would tell it here. I always sensed a bit of, well, something, but this was my first real paranormal experience, I guess you could say. I was 16 to 17 at the time, and we moved into an old rundown house. I hated one section of the house in particular, including 2 bedrooms and a hallway, from the second that I stepped foot in there. But one of those bedrooms ended up being my room too. I absolutely hated that house. I constantly felt this presence that was so heavy, loud, dark, but not in the way that we typically feel, hear, or see things. That was the best way that I could describe it. It was almost like a physical thing that would follow me around, like I was aware of where it was at any given time. I could feel it coming and it would always fill me with dread. I was terrified. I would try to go to sleep at night and I could feel it moving towards me. It felt like it was crushing me and it was so dense and I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis every night. I would often just be sitting on the lounge and I could feel it coming towards me. I felt like I was being preyed on. It would happen so constantly that I would stay at my nan and pa's house a lot, but it literally never happened to me unless I was in that house. Now, in a different house, my twins were around 3 years old at the time. They would talk about the man who supposedly sat in the sunroom and lived in the wall. They would point at one section of the wall in the hallway. They said that he was nice and protected them from the girl, and the girl freaked them out. Like they would sprint back into the lounge room and say that they couldn't go anywhere because the girl was there. They described a little girl around 5 years old who had white skin, black hair, black eyes, cuts on her skin, wore undies, and would hiss at them with an angry face if they looked at her. The girl supposedly lived in my sister's cupboard, and they were too young to work it out at the time, but the back of my sister's cupboard was the same as the wall in the hallway where the man lived. They said that heaps of people lived in there, and we tried, but we could never find out much information about the house. Fast forward a few more years, another different old house. Hadn't experienced anything in that house until, well, stuff started happening out of nowhere. One of my twins, maybe 7 years old at the time I think, suddenly became terrified of going to bed. She refused to sleep with this one toy in her room, an old doll's pram that we had recently been given secondhand. She said that there was a black man with a tall hat who had pushed the pram back and forth in her room. The squeaking of the wheels was so loud that she had to block her ears, and he wanted her to look, but she would hide under her blanket, allegedly. And look, I know that this is going to sound bad, but I didn't really take it too seriously at the time, and just sort of kept brushing it off. At the same time, I had started having horrific nightmares, all of them about trying to protect my kids from being taken in weird places with lots of people around. They were so vivid and awful, I was constantly stressed and dreaded going to sleep. One night in the middle of the night, I'd woken up from one of those nightmares and I walked to the bathroom. I looked down the hallway and I swore that there was something at the end of it. Maybe a little bit insane, but I said, if there's something there, then please leave. And then the light switched on. I was beyond shocked. That was still to this day the most undeniable, cannot gaslight myself out of seeing that, experience that I've ever had. I didn't put two and two together as well, until the other twins started talking about it too. I had asked her to brush her teeth one night and she had walked into the bathroom but then sprinted back and jumped on the bed. She said, "Mom, I know you're not going to believe this because it's not real, but it is," and then went on to explain the same top hat man who she said had been hanging around the house for a couple of weeks. She said that he followed her around and watched her while she was in her room or the bathroom. I asked if she had ever spoken to her twin about it, but she said no, so I called her in. The conversation that they had then was really creepy too, but fascinating to listen to. They were going back and forth describing the same experiences and agreeing with each other. I have no idea why they hadn't talked about it to each other until then, but everything kind of clicked into place then, and we were like, okay, this is weird. We need to sort this out. Ceremoniously threw the toy pram out the front door, and we tried out a bunch of hippie house cleansing stuff, and weirdly, it just never happened again after that. Now, you're probably not going to believe this, but we were in yet another old house afterward. Super straightforward experience here, but I kept feeling a light, white, feminine presence around me, like I would see a white, cloudy thing out of the corner of my eye sometimes. It didn't feel threatening, so I'd just carry on about my day. Happened pretty often in that house too. On the other hand, one of my twins refused to sleep in her initially designated bedroom because of what she called the fat lady. One of the first nights we lived there, she came bolting out of her room screaming because the fat lady supposedly stuck her head out of the wall above her and screamed in her face. I didn't hear anything about it after the first week or two of living there, but she would not go back in that room. Just before I gave birth to my fourth child, I could feel this super positive energy around, like undeniably something there, almost like a physical thing that I could see and feel as a light, airy thing. I didn't acknowledge it to anyone, I just felt it there, but one day my daughter walks into my room and we're chatting for a sec. I could feel this presence in the hallway at my door but didn't say anything. As my daughter walked out, she paused for a second in the doorway, turned around to me and went to say something, but I stopped her, told her to wait, and I quickly wrote down what I had just been seeing or feeling, then told her that she could start talking. And yeah, she goes on to ask if I've noticed the white shadowy thing hanging around. I showed her what I had written down, and that one was a pretty cool experience. I don't know why, but I was always certain that it was my partner's Nan. I had never met her, but something was telling me that. And this is our current experience and what has prompted me to dig all of this up and share it with you guys. My pa died in April of this year, and a few days after his funeral, my son's toys started turning on when I'd walk past his room. I brushed it off as it was nothing really significant enough for me to mention to my sister, but just so I had it in writing, I guess, I wrote it down. I didn't acknowledge it to anyone else. Since then, though, my son, 5 years old, has been talking about what he calls the magic in his room. He's constantly telling me about how the magic keeps moving his toys and taking out his books. I keep suggesting that maybe it's one of us moving his things, but he is adamant that it's the magic. He says that it wants to push my cars. It's like a person, but it's not because that's not real. Like the fairies and stuff. He has said that it's weird, but he doesn't seem scared by it or anything. And well, if you've gotten this far, then thanks for listening. I don't blame you if you think that I'm insane and full of it, or both. I honestly don't put too much thought into all of this in my day-to-day life. Just a little bit of a collection of unexplained experiences that I've had, I guess. I have no idea what to make of it all, but it's definitely opened my eyes to the other side of, well, life, I guess. I hope that there's a God because, well, I have a lot of questions for him when I die. I get night terrors pretty often, well, ever since I was in a crib, really. Although, over the decades, I've learned to manage it, and I manage it with like anti-anxiety meds and SSRIs. Usually, I've chalked these up to being extremely realistic nightmares, or just night terrors. They have been really bad before, usually involving some kind of human or humanoid form staring at me, causing me to scream and bolt out of my bed, sometimes injuring myself too. Side note as well, if anyone has experience with ultra-realistic nightmare hallucinations like these of people, well, then please let me know. I've been trying to dig for more information since I read here that usually with night terrors, people don't remember them, but I remember mine vividly every time. Anyway, last night, and I'm a 29-year-old female, my boyfriend, 31 male, slept over. I was in the twilight state, which is usually when I have these hallucinations, and instantly opened my eyes to see a bluish, slightly glowing humanish form shooting face first right at me. It was super quick. Visually, it looked like it was coming at my face like a sharp burst of air, I guess. I screamed and swatted the air and then frantically told my boyfriend to turn on the light, which he did. But what really surprised and unsettled me was that after a couple of minutes of pacing and looking terrified, my boyfriend told me that a millisecond before I screamed, he had been startled to see a black shape shoot across the room towards me. When I shrieked and panicked, his first thought was apparently, oh heck no, she saw it too. Understandably, he has requested that we stay somewhere else tonight. He described seeing a glimpse of a statuesque face like the Statue of Liberty's, which is close to what I saw too, I guess. except the bluish glowing figure had a sort of contorted or mocking or maybe amused look on its face. The vibe that I felt was that it wanted to scare me, like a prank. I guess I wanted to see too if anyone else here has experienced something similar or has advice on how to handle this. It is the first time that someone besides myself has seen one of my night terrors, and honestly, I'm just kind of stunned. I'm actually going to a spiritual shop later today, so if anyone has any recommendations on what to buy, I'd be grateful for that help. This happened a long time ago when I was around 13 to 14 in northwestern GA on the corner of Alabama and TN. Context too is that I'm now 22. So I was at my stepdad's house, which is situated down a long driveway in the woods. There's a house just ahead of this, separated by a thin veil of trees, but no other houses or buildings for a good few miles on either side, and the woods in the back go on for a good while as well, so it's very isolated. I had taken my dog Jack out to pee. Rip Jack, he died a while back. And as I walk down the stairs of the deck with him, he stops and starts to growl, whimper, and it was all sort of directed towards the woodline. Along the right side of the house, I thought maybe there was a coyote or something, so I walked towards the woodline to get a better view, to see what it is that he was freaked out by. And I see something just barely in sight. It stood a good 6 to 7 feet tall, and had patches of fur like mange, a short snout, very canine looking, but kind of human-like face as well, staring at me. Upon seeing that, I backed up, grabbed Jack, and ran up the stairs and locked the front door behind me. I never saw it again after that. It didn't make any moves other than when it was looking at me, but it spooked me so bad that I refused to go outside or even anywhere within the house by myself, to the point where I was just too scared to even leave my room to use the bathroom for quite some time. Yes, I had a few incidences, and I know, gross and embarrassing, but I was a kid and I was freaked the heck out. Now that I'm older, I've started to wonder, maybe if I just imagined it, or maybe if I just misidentified whatever it was. Who really knows, I guess, but what I will never forget is the feeling of fear that I had that day. So my aunt was telling me she and my niece, 12 years old, came over to my house to drop some stuff off 2 days ago, around 8:30 at night. I try to leave my porch and kitchen lights off as much as I can to save money and all that, but I'll turn them on when I answer the door for, well, anyone really. This interaction took place in the dark. No porch lights were on, the kitchen light wasn't on, and my aunt was sitting in her car with her headlights on facing the door, so she watched this whole thing happen. Now, my niece knocked on my front door. I have a screen door, and said that my sister answered the door but was behind the screen door. She said that she also saw my other sister's boyfriend standing behind her in the kitchen. She tried to ask for me, but my sister didn't say anything to her and just sort of stared at her through the screen door. She said that something seemed off about her, that she got scared, so she ran back to the car and told her mum what had happened. But here's the kicker. My sisters and the boyfriend moved out going on like 2 months ago. I live completely alone. I was home alone that night, in fact. I was in my room the whole night, and I didn't hear the knocking or the talking or anything. The only thing I remember happening was my dog barking. I paused my TV and sat in silence, trying to hear anything that would make him bark, but heard nothing. I don't know what time that was exactly, but I'm assuming that he must have heard the knocking. I asked my aunt over and over again if she was sure that that happened because, I was home alone and there is no way either of my sisters or the boyfriend could have answered the door that night. But she and my niece swear that that happened, and now I really don't feel comfortable in my own home. My dog this morning kept growling and barking. He's very sweet and quiet unless he feels threatened or in danger. He was barking at something that I couldn't see or hear, and that freaked me out even more. Recently, I've had this fear of encountering a mimic since living home alone, so I'm very on edge, and I don't really care what other people think about this, but I needed to share it, and I'm hoping to get some advice as to, well, how to make any of this stop quickly. So picture this. It's Connecticut, middle of winter in January of 2008, and we had just gotten lots of snow. Me and 4 other friends had been working hard at our small community college, and we wanted something to do over winter break. We ended up finding a cute little cabin on a lake up near Orient, Maine, and after much fuss from our parents, we put our money down and started getting ready for the road trip. Keep in mind, this was before the shift from MapQuest to the common use of GPS, TomToms, etc., and before my cell phone was attached to my hip too. We found directions on MapQuest though, and set off on our first taste of freedom in a while. We packed into my friend's small red Acura and drove the 8+ hours from CT after our last college course around 2 p.m. Looking back on this, it was a horrid idea to pack 5 kids into a small car in the middle of winter and drive in the northern states. I mean, it was cold and dreary the whole ride up. That wet and cold that sticks to you, you know it if you've been in it. The driver, his name was Jay, he was in love with his Acura. He had very strict rules for driving, gassing it up and stopping, so we settled into the car for a long stretch of driving and blasted some music to pass the time. Further north, we got to where the weather sort of became where the roads were, and we became very nervous, and it was icing. The further you get up into mid-Maine, the further the distance between exits, snow lights, and all that is. It's basically just the moon and the stars. Looming pine forests line the 2-lane highway, and it's a sparsely populated area. Tiny little towns, mile off of the highway peppering the landscape. Because of this, we agreed to make one long food stop only for dinner. Delicious Taco Bell. And before heading into more desolate areas, during dinner, I made the rookie mistake of getting a giant Sprite, but made sure to use the bathroom before we left, and we continued on into the night. Infrequently, I spotted glimmers of lights from little homes and towns passed from the passenger seat, and after a couple of hours, there came a point that I really needed to pee. When I mention it, it's usually at the last minute, and it was an imminent nuclear-level disaster if we didn't stop soon. But there were no signs for a gas station on, well, any of the last 10 exits for the past 40 minutes, and I was ready to pull over on the side of the road I was busting. It was beyond painful. But my friend driving was paranoid and refused. He said, something just didn't feel right. It doesn't feel right to stop. Now, I'm usually very good with sensing strangeness, but I was so distracted by my body mechanics that I didn't care, to be honest. I pressed my eyes shut, drummed my hands and fingers, started singing with music, and pleading to whatever god was out there that could hear me, anything to help distract me. And as if the universe heard my plea and I manifested it myself, the next exit had a small sign for a locally owned gas station, which was going to be absolutely perfect. After a little protest, I let Jay know that his car would soon be baptized in my urine, and so we pulled off. We drove another 10 minutes until we pulled up at this tiny, I'm talking like 500 square feet max, dimly lit and decrepit gas station. Nothing surrounded us for miles, and there was a large paved area that surrounded this small building, seemingly to make it easier for large trucks with small trailers to pull around the back, I guess. A dumpster sat in the back left by the trees, no lights in the parking lot, just light from the sliver of the waxing moon. Inside the shop, there were 2 green fluorescent lights, but they barely reached the 2 old pumps outside. It seemed like the darkness was encroaching on the sickly-looking gas station, almost ready to swallow it. The moonlight, it just didn't seem to touch it though, and that creepy feeling that we had all started to talk about was now growing stronger. We chalked it up to the unfamiliar territory, and the fact that it was dead of winter in the middle of the night. I practically teleported out of the passenger seat and inside, barely getting out the word bathroom, when the tired, middle-aged attendant slowly reached for the keys and finally tossed them to me, not saying a word, crooking his hand and pointing to the outside corner of the small building. My stomach got that quick anxiety pang. I strongly remember having such an uneasy feeling about going back there. As I ran back out of the door, I demanded everyone come back and stand outside to wait for me, for safety and for company. My boyfriend obliged, and the others understandably stayed in the car. I rounded the corner and did a brief double take as I saw someone standing by the dumpster. Just a dark figure. The moonlight reflected off of their dark, short hair and what looked to be a fur-lined coat. The urge to pee was too strong now, though, for me to care about it for even a moment, and I felt reassured hearing my boyfriend's footsteps behind me, too. I struggled to unlock the door, and as I made it inside, fumbled for a switch. Much to my delight, I discovered that there was no lighting as I started to relieve myself. Fantastic. I called through the beat-up metal door for something, anything to light up this closet of a bathroom. I had left my phone in the car cup holder, unfortunately, and I hear a small shuffling sound, and my imagination was running wild. Bugs crawling around the walls, bumping into spent toilet paper, a person standing in the corner. My boyfriend at the time thankfully had a flashlight. He was in the military and always came prepared. I didn't lock it, so he peeked it through the crack in the door, and my eyes had adjusted to the darkness at this stage. I remember seeing the treetops, the starry night in all of its beauty, and some dark mass by the dumpster again, through the crack, before clicking on the light, which honestly blinded me at first. My sixth sense, for a lack of a better term, was starting to become more prevalent, now that I had started to get physical relief. I kept telling myself it's just an unfamiliar area in the dead of night, nothing to worry about. I felt overall unwelcome, though, and felt the need to rush, too. I remember that unwelcome feeling vividly. I recall my boyfriend. He had asked if I was almost done, to which I replied I was not even close. I heard some talking getting closer, and Sam, the other girl on the trip, made a comment along the lines of, "You see that? Who would be outside at this hour in the cold like this?" And I hear her boyfriend say something like, "Yeah, it's 10 degrees outside. There's no way." Another strange voice came through the door. It was the gas station attendant coming with them. I learned later that Sam had decided to go pee too since we were stopping, and she saw the figure as well. She went inside to tell the attendant about someone outside, and she mentioned that he didn't respond but came out from behind the counter. As I was finishing buttoning up my jeans, feeling a million times better, I swear that I heard breath in my ear. As corny as that sounds, even though I had this deep pit of fear and unease growing in my gut ever since we arrived, in that moment, I convinced myself that it was just me shuffling around on the dirty tiles. Though, I know that I didn't move my feet. Dirt crunching softly does not sound like a human breath either, and even as I share this, my whole body just chills up. In any case, I immediately raised the flashlight up to the mirror that was fogged with the age and the soap scum. No one was behind me, thankfully. I was ready to hit the road, though, and get the heck out of Dodge. So I flung open the door and booked it through my boyfriend, Sam, and her boyfriend, and the attendant, who was standing a bit hunched near them, which was a bit odd, I admit. I scanned the empty pavement. There seemed to be this lingering darkness hanging around the forest line where it met the parking lot. I turned to the dumpster, and this time no one was there. It should have been reassuring, I know, but it ended up freaking me out even more. "I think we should go. Sam, do you really have to pee?" I asked. I remember she looked uncomfortable. They all did. It was like the attendant was trying to block us from rounding the corner to get to the front of the store, or keep us in the area so something could sneak up on us and maybe attack us. I just got that threatening feeling all of a sudden. In hindsight, maybe he was just trying to make sure we didn't trash anything. I don't know, but I heard Jay start up the Acura, and I gave the attendant a wide berth. He wasn't saying anything, wasn't even really looking at us. I swear the darkness that seemed to be devouring the light from the shop earlier was emanating off or around him, though. And I know that this is going to sound a bit crazy, but you know when you can just sort of tell that somebody has bad intentions? Well, everything screamed in me that it was time to go. Sam and everyone picked up on the hint and they rushed to the pumps, piling into the car as fast as we could, and pulling out. We laughed about it, once we were about 20 minutes away, that is, down one of the main freeways. We eventually made it to the cabin, and we enjoyed our first night there. Now, the second part of this story was the next day. We had brought some snacks and cereal, but after messing around, enjoying the frozen lake and watching movies all day, we quickly realized that we needed some more sustenance, and had asked one of the neighboring cabins if there was a town around where we could go and get supplies and food. The neighbor told us about a Walmart or someplace up Route 1 to Hulton. The populated town was almost an hour away, but the neighbor said to just drive straight for about 45 minutes and you'll be in downtown before you know it. It was later in the evening, the sun had gone down, and we once again all piled into Jay's Acura, and me in the front seat, my boyfriend right behind me, Sam and her boyfriend next to him. Jay, he was super nervous to drive. Temperatures had gone from single digits to negatives, which meant that the wet had turned to ice in many areas. But we made the slow and steady trip up to Hulton, got our supplies, and made our way back to the cabin. Halfway there, rounding one of the bends, he saw a person on the road. No distinguishing features, according to him, but Jay had started to panic a bit, yet slowed down and turned the car to avoid them, but ended up hitting a patch of black ice. The next thing we know, we're all spinning out of control slowly off the road. I remember putting my foot up on the dash and my hand up to the ceiling as we hit a telephone pole with my passenger door. We descended into the snow-covered ditch, mostly unharmed, thankfully, discovering later as we were towed by a good Samaritan that we were 10 feet from landing in a river. Jay mentioned why he had started swerving, to which he was told abruptly that there was absolutely no one on the road. We were incredibly lucky, and we weren't the only car to slide off the road in the last 24 hours, apparently. There was a tan Mazda van about 30 feet to the left of us that had also shared a similar fate that night before. They, however, had landed in the water, but thankfully they still had all survived. Poor Jay was beside himself with heartbreak due to his poor car and the damages and all that. Thankfully, there was a body shop up in Hulton that could help. But he swears, based on what we were telling him on the car ride up the night before, that something had followed us or attached to us. He was adamant it must have been the person from the gas station, but we all didn't see what he saw. Maybe the attendant cursed us. Maybe it was just bad luck and bad timing. Whatever the case, though, we were grateful that nothing more came of it. We ended up doing a little seance or prayer thing that night to try and detach whatever energy seemed to have followed us, and had no issues during the remainder of the trip, thankfully. We, unfortunately, aren't friends anymore, but I do have a female attachment that I've had a couple of brushes with in the past, and most recently, last year. So, if you've made it this far, then thanks for hearing me out. It was one of the strangest experiences that I've had over the years, and it's something that's always stuck with me. I would probably write the whole thing off as just anxiety, but the fact that Jay saw that person on the road and we didn't see anything, that part has always troubled me. Meet Jane. I don't know much about Jane except that she's from a small town and she moved here with her friends and boyfriend for university. When I first met Jane at the pub, I honestly thought that she hated my guts. I mean, she always gave me nasty looks, and when my friends tried to approach her friends, she'd always be rude to me. Jane is pretty, like very pretty. Like every guy in town has a thing for her sort of pretty. But Jane's boyfriend is insane, to say the least. They are regulars at the pub, and I've seen them break up around 3 to 4 times, and the waiter working at the pub, guy in my friend group, says that he's noticed them break up a dozen more, but they always come back together. A couple of months back, though, I had just finished within the gym, and I had just showered when my mum called and asked about this pub, and how's the food there. I told her that the food's to die for, and she said that she and my stepdad were on their way there. I told them that I would meet them too, because I was dying for some hot wings and a burger or something. We sit down. Me and my dad just started drinking beer after beer, and in no time I had downed 5 pints of beer. I was getting a little bit tipsy, but I kept pushing through. My dear friend, Tina, called and asked if I was down for a drink. I told her to come to the pub as I was already there. She was going to meet my folks and they planned on leaving soon anyway, so she and I could continue then. And that's how it happened. My parents left and Tina and I continued drinking on our own. The pub was closing, so Tina decided to go to the bathroom and I walked with her inside to see if I could get another pint, which was when we stumbled upon Jane. Jane starts talking to Tina and I realize that they must know each other. We all sit down to comfort her as she was a crying mess. Her boyfriend and she were done for good this time apparently, and she revealed that he used to really abuse her, mentally and physically. Honestly, I felt bad for her, so when she rested on my shoulder, I just sort of let her. Tomorrow night, I get a DM from her and she's apologizing about the trauma dumping. I tell her that it's no biggie as we all need to vent sometimes, albeit I do that with my therapist. Not strangers, but whatever. The therapist is a stranger, I guess, that I pay. In any case, we continue chatting, and she constantly goes between I can't text you and then texting me again, don't text me and text me first when I don't. Keep in mind, this is like 2 days since that interaction. Anyway, one drunken night, she texted me to meet her. It was around 2 in the morning and I had my little cousin over. That whole night we watched movies and we had just basically fallen asleep, so I declined her offer. Also, I felt it was a bit weird for me to hang out with her when I was completely sober while she could barely see. I don't know, just weird to me. But the next day, she sobered up and I agreed to meet her for a hangout. We hung out for a while and she was honestly fun to hang out with. I did like her and I worried about her and her ex, I guess. Soon enough, her leech of an ex left town as he was never really interested in uni, just being close to her. And on one of our dates, she revealed to me that she realized that she had feelings for me. And that's when she broke up with her ex, resulting in him physically attacking her. One day we had a date at her place, a little study date. After we finished studying, we relaxed on the couch and ended up making out. We didn't go the whole way that night by any means. But I went home and we continued talking about it, even exchanging photos, and then we hooked up. Now, I'm a person who likes alone time, I guess you could say, so sometimes I just want to chill at my house and not really be with anyone, and she did not like this idea at all. She started spamming me with calls, saying how she should come over and we could chill, she'll be silent and I'll still be alone. In my opinion, this kind of defeats the idea of being alone, as I'm, well, not alone. That's when she threatened me, though, that if I didn't pick up the phone, that she would never talk to me again. This is where I snapped, and I told her that her lukewarm at best manipulation tactics would not work on me, and not to contact me again. She flipped out, and came to my part of town, hanging out and waiting for me to come out. I told her, I begged her 1,000,000 times not to come out to my house, but she simply said no, I'll pass, and came anyway. I literally felt so disrespected because all of a sudden I just had no value in life. When she texted me, come out, I'm here, I texted her, nah, I'll pass, and I stayed home. And now, she's been following me everywhere that I go. It's been months, and I'm now dating a different girl, the girl of my dreams, but that hasn't stopped her from being in my shadow. She learned my routine, when I go to the gym, when I'm at practice, etc., and she never fails to show up or drive past where I'm at. My stepbrother even reviewed the security footage from our house, and we've counted her car driving past my house at least 14 times in a day. I still get texts from her on the daily, even though she's blocked. She gets wasted and spams me with messages on WhatsApp that she then deletes later. My girlfriend is obviously absolutely livid with this chick, as she would not leave me the heck alone. I don't fear for my life, I guess, but I have warned my friends that if I do die, that it would not be an accident or me just self-deleting myself. She's in my shadow and I constantly have to check my 6 to see if she's behind me. Anyway, 2 days ago I went to the pub with my friend Stan. He's a new friend of mine as he's a close friend of one of my best friends. My neighbour best friend Jake was in Durban to visit his aunt, and me and Stan went to the pub as his friend and my other best friend, Liam, they were having the closing shift at the pub that night. So we went and we visited him and had a few drinks, and she was there. And everyone was giving me these weird stares like I'd murdered their whole family or something. Finally, the shift manager whom I'm close to came to me, and she laughingly told me that Jane got extremely drunk and talked about a man the whole night at the pub while sobbing. She then showed them a picture of me, and according to some other waiters, she was throwing an entire tantrum because she loved me and she left her boyfriend because of me. Regardless, I brushed it off and had to fight off the player accusation, because I'm just not one. Liam finished his shift though. We got into my car and we drove to my house where my girlfriend had already arrived. My mum and her were in the kitchen making dinner, and my stepbrother, younger brother, and stepdad were in the living room just shooting the breeze really, so I joined them with my friends. At one point, I was in the kitchen with my mum, girlfriend and stepbrother, and my mum asked, "Who made the kitchen into a mess this morning?" And my stepbrother said that it was me and my younger brother. We laughed at this, so I didn't hear the doorbell when it rang. My stepdad did, and he went to open the door. Jane, she was at the door and she had let herself in, and she was standing in my living room yelling after me. We came out of the kitchen and we were just sort of staring at her. She begged to talk to me, and I just stared at her and told her that we'd already covered everything. But she continued begging me. My girlfriend pulled me aside and told me that I should just talk with her and maybe it will give her closure and she'll leave me alone then. So I took her to my backyard and she started apologizing for hurting me. She said I'm sorry like 15 times. I told her that she has nothing to apologize for and that I just sadly cannot forgive manipulations that easily, and that she should really just give up. She started blaming the alcohol on it though, and how she was drunk that night. I told her that she's been drunk every day for like 9 months now since she arrived in this town. She's only known me for like 6 of those 9 months, mind you. She tells me how she used to drink herself crazy back then because of me too. And here's where I sort of snapped a bit, and I told her that I just caught her in another one of her lies, and she smirked, gave me this creepy look and said, "I love lying to you." The look she gave me, honestly, sent shivers down my spine. My yard was dark and her eyes just seemed demonic for a moment. She was continuously getting closer to me, and I froze. I couldn't step back. Not that she'd hurt me, I guess, as I'm 6'2" and 250 pounds, but a knife could do some good damage. But Jane, she had another idea. She launched herself at me, locking her lips with mine. I pushed her off, yelling for her to stop, yelling no. I walked inside and I was ticked. My girlfriend looked like she was about to beat her up, and I looked at my stepdad and begged for him to drive her home. They got her out of my house as she was literally kicking and screaming. But then she refused my stepdad's car ride and she decided to walk instead. In the middle of the night, mind you, in South Africa. Whoever has lived in South Africa will know that this is a stupid idea. Anyway, thankfully she got home safe as I woke up to text from her on WhatsApp that she had deleted again from a phone number that she had blocked me from. And as much as I'd hoped that that was going to be the end of it, it definitely wasn't. You see, for the past 3 months, until the 25th of September, my girlfriend and I, together with my younger brother, we went to Germany for one of our relatives' weddings. It was here that my girlfriend met my dad and my older brother who lives in the States, and overall in these 3 months I had no worries about Jane, as well as no contact with her at all. Well, the 25th rolls around and the 3 of us land back in South Africa. My stepdad picks us up and we went back to my house for lunch, and then I drove my girlfriend back to her house. I was pretty exhausted from the flight, so her and I took a nap at her place, got up at around 7, and she started getting ready for the night out. At 9, we sat in this one pub with 3 of my friends, and my best friend snapped a picture of me, posting it on his story with the caption, "The boys back in town," together with the bald eagle and burger emojis. Man, I hate that guy, but, well, not even 2 minutes later, Jane walks into the pub. We brushed it off as just a coincidence, as she doesn't follow him on Instagram or anything, but we later realized that one of her friends does. We ignored her as we continued drinking. I don't know if she was staring toward us or not, as I specifically instructed everyone not to look at her direction, and overall, it was a pretty nice and fun night out, really. Fast forward to the 27th, though. My friends and I packed my truck as we planned to spend 2 days at Dragon's Peaks, a mountainous area roughly 2 hours from town. I asked my girlfriend if she was willing to come, but she said that she had plans with her girls, so she stayed in town. Well, my girlfriend went into town and into the pub that we usually chill at, and she sat behind the bar as one of her girls works there, and they wanted to include everyone in the hangout. The girl working behind the bar jokingly asked her, "You finally left your man and came crawling back to us, huh?" To which my girlfriend replied with, "I hated him so much anyway, and to heck with him." This is a paraphrasing of the conversation, obviously, as they were just joking around and drinking. But they kept joking about us breaking up and my girlfriend needing her friends again, but they didn't realize that Sam, one of Jane's friends, was there, listening to them. It was around the same time that Jane texted me from one of her burners, and I know that it was around the same time as I texted my girlfriend right away, and that's when she spotted Sam connecting the dots. But Jane asked me to meet up, at least for 15 minutes, now that I don't have a girlfriend anymore. I asked her what she was talking about, and Jane sent me a text saying that my girlfriend is embarrassing me at the pub right now, telling everyone how much she hates me, how I was one of the worst person to be born, and things of this nature. I thanked Jane for the heads up and told her that I will no longer be replying to her texts. And she starts manically texting me even more, begging to me for at least 15 minutes, and she'll get over me and she'll stop thinking about me, but how she needs to see me in person in order for her to fully move on. I told her that I wasn't in town, and she texted me something that fully made me want to get on a plane and move back to the States. She texted me, "Where the heck are you? I watched you having rugby practice this morning." This is when I put my phone down and I didn't respond. She went back to her usual texting me a ton of messages and deleting them before I could see them. She even started calling me. I blocked her, and to no one's shock, an unknown number starts calling me. I blocked her again, and I started getting phone calls from no caller ID. I knew that it was her, obviously, as that's a way to bypass being blocked. I turned off my phone and texted my girlfriend what happened from my friend's phone, telling her to contact me there if something happened. On the 29th, I went back into town and I changed my phone number. And now on the 1st of this month, I still haven't had any contact with Jane. My phone has been quiet. But I did see her car parked at the gym parking lot, so I didn't go to my usual gym today. Instead, I paid for 1 day of working out at another gym. My plan is to fully change my gym in the end and to start avoiding the pub altogether, hopefully so that she can finally move on. My family and friends say that it's not fair for me to miss out on hanging out with friends at a place where we've been hanging out for like 3 years now, but I really just see no other way out. I'll keep you guys updated if anything more comes of it, but please do wish me luck, and if you've got any advice on how to get rid of this chick, then I'm all ears. This experience occurred several months after another event, and it was the remaining paranoia from it that helped me realize what was happening, and very well may have actually saved my life. I was 18 at the time, although commonly mistaken for being in my early teens, and had just finished some errands in town and decided to take a shortcut to catch the bus home. Said shortcut being a narrow street on one of the shopping center's entrances opened onto. It was honestly more of a glorified alleyway, but since the street connected onto the high street, and it was the quickest way into the shopping center, it usually got a decent amount of foot traffic and was extremely safe to use. However, depending on the time of the day, there may have only been very few, if any, people there, and that was the case on this day. Just as I was walking out of the entrance, and celebrating the fact that it wasn't blocked by people standing around talking as usual. A young man around my age startled me by stepping out of the small alcove beside the door and blocking my path with an, "Oh, hi there, how are you? Have you been shopping?" The way that he had approached me immediately put me off, but the overly familiar, fancy seeing you here sort of tone that he was using made me hesitate for a moment, wondering if he was just someone from high school who maybe recognized me and wanted to say hello. So I muttered, yeah, hi, to stall for a moment while I racked my brain for who this could have been. It didn't take me long to confirm that I didn't know a good-looking, fit blonde 20-something with bright blue eyes and a heavy accent, and since I couldn't think of a good reason someone like that would approach me, my socially awkward, non-confrontational past self decided the best way to deal with this situation was to just dodge around him and leave. He didn't let me, though. Instead of taking the hint, he immediately started walking in stride with me on the side of the street closest to the road, so that I was between him and the side of the building. And when I tried to speed up because I didn't like the feeling of being penned in, he sped up along with me, keeping me between him and the wall. As off-putting as that already was, he began asking me questions that seemed innocent enough but all centered around where I was headed, and if anyone was going to be waiting for me there. Where are you going now? Have you not finished your shopping? Are you meeting your friends? Maybe I could come with you, or are you meeting your family instead? Do you have a boyfriend? Is he who you're meeting? Are you going home? Do you live near here, or are you getting a bus? I had already asked him to leave me alone once, and he acted like I hadn't even said anything. So I was ignoring his questions and glancing around desperately hoping that someone else would enter the street with us in case he didn't react well to being asked a second time. And that is why I noticed the second man. He was older, in his late 30s or early 40s with dark hair, a short but scruffy beard, and had the kind of face and expression that tells you that you might need to be cautious when dealing with this person. I have no idea where he had come from. My guess is that he was hiding in the alcove on the other side of the door from the blonde or further down that side of the street out of sight, but he was now walking in line with us, on the opposite side of the road, staring the entire time. I tried not to let either of the men realize that I had seen him while my brain went into overdrive, trying to figure out what their endgame was. Were they going to assault me? I mean, surely they wouldn't risk being caught doing that broad daylight, right outside of a shopping center. Maybe they were just going to rob me. But if they wanted to do that, the blonde could have just grabbed my bag and ran when he had the element of surprise back when he was hiding behind the door. And then I remembered something that made my blood run cold. You see, at the end of the street was an underground parking garage, the entrance of which opened up onto the pavement me and the blonde were walking to, and I would have to walk right past it because of the way that he was pinning me in towards that wall. It would take him barely any effort to shove me through it, and the dark-haired man across the street had been toying with something in his pocket that I worried at first was a weapon. But what if it was car keys instead? What if they were planning to drag me in there and take me into a car, take me to who knows where and do who knows what to me? We were very close to the end of the street now, so I abruptly dropped back behind the blonde and darted towards the road, wanting to get away from the garage and make a beeline for the end of the street without getting within arm's reach of the dark-haired man. The blonde immediately darted after me and blocked my path, herding me back towards the pavement and penning me in so close to the wall this time that my arm was almost scraping across it as I walked, all while still talking to me casually as if he wasn't doing anything wrong. They obviously knew that the game was up at this point though, and when I glanced over at the dark-haired man to check where he was, he locked eyes with me, laughed and called out to the blonde in a different language. The best that I was able to determine later was that it was Eastern European, but not Lithuanian, Polish, Romanian or Russian, saying something that made him laugh too and double down on his "is anyone going to miss you" questions, while also asking me if I had ever had a boyfriend, if I had ever kissed a boy, or would I like him to be my boyfriend, etc. Obviously, I continued to ignore them and was panicking more and more as we approached the garage, but fortunately for me, the dark-haired man started to lose his patience with the blonde's lack of progress with me and began snapping at him, presumably demanding that he get me to answer because the blonde looked worried and his tone was getting more urgent every time the man spoke to him. Only a few feet from the garage, the dark-haired man apparently crossed a line because the blonde suddenly looked furious, stopped walking, spun around and started shouting back at him. I immediately took the opportunity to bolt for the end of the street, and although I heard the blonde shout, "Hey, where are you going?" and what I assume was both of them running behind me, I managed to round the corner and lost them by ducking down the next street, and then several more just to be safe. I didn't feel safe enough to go to my original bus stop, in case they stayed in the area and saw me, so I headed for one several blocks away instead, on edge and jumping at the slightest thing until I was on the bus and headed home. Although I tried to report the incident to the police, they weren't particularly interested since neither of the men had actually put their hands on me and I had no proof of what I assumed they were planning to do to me. I never heard about any abductions, assaults, or robberies in that area, so I'm hoping that they simply gave up after the plan didn't work with me. I'm glad that I was paranoid enough to save myself from that situation, but I do worry sometimes that maybe another girl, maybe she wouldn't be so lucky. This happened in July of 2021, around 2 to 3 in the morning, but I remember it like it just happened. I think about it more than I'd like to admit, but for some background, I've always believed in the paranormal and have had a couple of experiences over the years. What sets this one apart, though, is the fact that it was witnessed by another person, who was a non-believer prior to this. So we were driving along what I think was Highway 212 in rural country somewhere between Bellefourche, SD and Hammond MT. We were going to a music festival in northwestern MT from KY and made it a point to not talk about paranormal activities and entities due to potentially manifesting something prior to leaving on the trip. My cousin was driving and I was in the passenger seat. The 2 others were in the back and we had been taking shifts driving so that we didn't have to stay at a hotel and could drive straight through. My cousin and I, we were on night shift due to the nature of our profession, which kept us awake at odd hours. We'd been passing the time by just messing around, listening to music, and looking at the local wildfire as we drove through. We had seen a lot of pronghorns and nice deer earlier in the day. Both of us being outdoorsmen, we were pointing out every game animal that we caught the faintest glimpse of. We were on a particularly barren stretch of road and hadn't seen a man-made light for miles at this point. No other cars on the road, no houses, nothing. We were reveling on the novelty of it all as we didn't have stuff like this back home. I was the first one to point out the deer that was coming into view of the headlights. As we approached, there was clearly something off about this animal though. My cousin says, "Man, that's a weird looking deer." The animal was sort of turned broadside to us, standing on the right side of the road facing the highway. It had its nose to the ground like it was foraging. The coat was an odd sort of greyish white, which was odd as deer tend to stay more red throughout the summer. There was obvious flesh hanging from the antlers. This was also odd because the antlers were fully formed. Deer in July should still be in velvet, which means their antlers are still growing. They were also stark white, no sign that they had recently been rubbed. As we got closer, I could start to see that there were patches of fur missing. Not mange, but there were sores, open wounds, ranging from tennis ball to dinner plate size. The bones of the deer were also visible through the skin. It looked like an embodiment of a term that paleontologists use called shrink wrapping. And that's about the time that I noticed how disproportionate it was. The front legs were way too short, the back legs were too long, and the knees bent out to the sides, not backward. The spine was twisted and stuck up in random intervals down the length of the back. The neck was far too long to be on a buck. And then there was the snout. It wasn't built like a normal snout. It was stocky, rigid, and angular. It looked extremely, well, predatory almost. It was almost as if something had taken deer skin and stretched it out over a wolf's skull. As the front tire became even with the deer's head, it looked up and it had some strange eyes too. I don't know how to exactly explain this, but they were a sort of deep brown, nearly red color. They were clouded but sort of hollow. Its tongue hung from the side of its half-open mouth. There were visibly pointed teeth, but they were not canine. Deer don't have top teeth in the front, but this one did. It looked like someone had grabbed a random handful of teeth from a jar and sort of glued them into this thing. Not just deer teeth, but a jar full of teeth from almost like random animals. Suddenly, though, time slowed down and I felt my heartbeat in my ears. My hands and ears got hot and I gripped the door panel. It locked eyes with me, and I have never been so sure that I was about to die in my entire life. It maintained eye contact and followed me as we passed by it. My cousin said, in a manner of concern that I've never heard from him, "What the heck was that? Did you see that?" To which I replied, "Yeah," and he said, "Are we going to talk about it?" And I said no, and so we sat in silence. The air was thick and I could hear him breathing heavy over the other two that were snoring in the back. He was gripping the steering wheel with both hands. I turned the radio up and we just sort of sat there. We went until the next streetlights before we said anything to each other. We agreed not to discuss it until we were back from our trip. We took an alternate route home to see some things that we couldn't hit on the way up there, but I had the feeling neither one of us wanted to go back that way anyway. We've talked about it a couple of times since then. There are people that don't believe me when I tell them, obviously. Most people, though, can tell when I'm not making stuff up, and I don't look for opportunities to talk about it at all, really. If the conversation is right, though, I'm more than willing to share it, obviously. But I always get knots in my stomach thinking about it. I know what many things look like. I know what sick deer look like. I know what deer that have been hit by cars look like. I don't know what this was. I also don't know if anyone has any idea of what it might have been, or maybe had a similar experience, but I just thought that this might be the best place to share this and maybe get some people's opinions. Me and my fiancée just bought our first house, and it seemed fine and nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. But once we closed on the house officially, and have been doing some renovations before moving in, when I'm alone at the house like 9 to 10, something unexplainable happens. When we first started to get deep into our renovations, we noticed that when we came back in, one morning all the coat hangers in the guest room closet were on the floor. No one had been in that room all day while we were working. I started having freak experiences, the first time when I was working alone, with voices coming from other rooms and my voice being repeated back to me from the hallway. Then that same day, later into the night, I hear what sounds like footsteps and voices again coming from the living room, going into the attic as I'm in the guest room. I get a break for a couple of days from anything too noticeable going on after that. Then, just recently, I was getting ready to leave out on the front porch and hear what sounds like claps coming from the road in front of me. I've constantly felt like I'm being watched there, even when I'm not alone. I thought it was kind of isolated to the hallway and guest room, but after what I just experienced, I truly don't know anymore. I'm set to move in fully next week, and I'm wondering if there's anything that I can do to calm it down or something. This whole situation just seems to be getting worse, and that really worries me. Things used to happen to me that I cannot explain, and I still have trauma from them too. I'll try to describe them as best as I can, and I would be glad if someone who might know something about this could respond. So I lived with my dad in a house that wasn't pretty to look at. We didn't have much money, so the house was never fixed up. When all of my siblings left to live their own lives, I stayed with my dad alone. I was in my sister's room, and my sister used to experience paranormal phenomena in that room because of our dead brother, who died when I was young and used to visit her allegedly. At the time, I was in my sister's room, and I didn't know about it. Every day at around 1 a.m. I would always hear noises though, and weirdly it was like someone walking back and forth on all fours. It was very disturbing to me, and then I heard and saw something pushing on the door, but it was closed, so it didn't open. This happened pretty much every day, so I started barricading the door with all sorts of stuff, wood and barrels and things like this, so that whatever it was couldn't get inside. This went on every day for about a week. I did an experiment where before going to bed I left the light on. Of course I was barricaded in again so no one could get inside. But the next day I woke up and to my shock the light was off. The barricade was still in place, mind you, and I should note that I'm not a sleepwalker. And when I woke up I thought the bulb had burned out or something, but when I tried the switch, sure enough the light turned on normally, which meant that someone must have turned it off. Dad couldn't have gotten inside because of the barricade, so it couldn't have been him. And besides, he would have been upset that I left the light on like that, but he was calm, and the barricade was still intact. Because of these things, I started having sleep paralysis, I think, almost every day. Even a normal dream would turn into sleep paralysis, or I would experience it as soon as I was almost falling asleep. An example of this was that I was in a dream where I greeted a friend, and we were about to high-five, but before we could, everything started to sort of ripple and spin. We spoke in a language that sped up, slowed down, or was in reverse, a kind of language that gave me goosebumps. Suddenly, I woke up from the dream and saw the two of us in front of me continuing to speak in that strange language, and I noticed that our faces were deformed, like uncanny valley type of deformed. This lasted about 40 seconds before eventually I snapped out of it. When all of these things were happening, I was always scared to go to the bathroom. One time I went to the bathroom with a flashlight, and we had the bathroom window open. Outside the window was our dog's bed. Whenever he wanted to come to us, he would whine, but at that time of night, it was always this strange whining. Almost, I want to say, unnatural, and it would always get closer to the window. I would always quickly run back to my room before the whining got too close to the window, so I never did actually confirm that it was him. And so, does anyone know what the heck any of this could be? Why was this happening to me? What kind of thing or entity was doing this? I'm also wondering if the entity somehow influenced the sleep paralysis or something, making it so frequent, or if something else was living in my room with me. Honestly, too, I think it's possible because of the experiment with the light. I really would appreciate any of your comments or your feedback. My story is from 2014. I was 19 years old and it happened in the middle of the day, between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. I can't remember exactly. I was in Morocco, in a very small village of 30 people, near a beach in the Atlantic coast. There were 2 dogs in front of the house to protect it. My family wanted to go to the beach, but I was starting to get flu symptoms, so I decided to stay in the house and just rest, even if I would be alone all day. I didn't want to catch a cold at the beach or whatever. From now on, I have to say that I did not take any medication or anything else to feel better, so it's not the case of hallucinations or anything. But I was laying in bed, just reading a fantasy book. No music, no TV, nothing that could do any sort of noise or whatever. At some point, I heard the 2 dogs barking really loudly, as if an unknown person was coming or whatever. I went to the window quickly, but nobody was there. No family member, no stranger, nobody. A few seconds after hearing the dogs barking, I started to notice that I was hearing another noise, a very strange noise coming from the kitchen. It was like whispers. It was as if 2 or 3 women were whispering some sort of incantations in the kitchen. At that, I was terrified. I didn't know where these whispers were coming from. It was not from the pipes, nor from the wind or anything. There was no wind that day. But it was just there, floating in the air, and I couldn't do anything to make it stop. After about 3 minutes, the whispers and the barking, they stopped simultaneously. Since that day, I'm always afraid to be alone in remote houses like that, especially if no one is there. And I'm also afraid of dogs as well, I guess. I never knew what happened that day, and I never actually asked anyone what it could have been. I've never had any other weird experiences before or since then. I'm not the type of person to believe in things like this, so I try to have a rational explanation about this experience, but honestly, I just can't explain it. And so I would be happy to get your theories as to what you think this might have been. So, I used to work at a nursing home. As most of our patients are the elderly, there's obviously plenty of deaths that occur at our facility. I worked down in the dementia care ward, and there was a lovely resident that I cared for. Her name was Beth. She was unfortunately put on hospice a few weeks ago, and she met her untimely death 3 days ago. She was 92. As a residential care associate, it was my job to clean out the room for a new resident. As I walked into her room, it felt really cold. Too cold, in fact. And that is weird because all nursing homes are always hot because the elderly get pretty cold easily. I just felt a kind of cold that was bone-chilling, though. I tried to shrug it off as I took the sheets off the bed, but as I was bending over to take off the fitted sheet, I swear to you that I felt a push. It felt like cold hands pushed me with strength that I'd never felt before. It happened so quick that I was just confused and scared. I quickly grabbed all the sheets and I booked it out of that door. But when I turned my head around, I saw it. I saw a human-like figure, a shadow in the closet. It was a quick look, so I couldn't really identify the person, but I can't help but think that it was Beth playing a prank on me before she departed to the afterlife, as me and her would always play pranks on one another while I took care of her. But to be honest, I don't know if that is actually the case. So yeah, that's my encounter with the paranormal, and I really don't know what to think about it. So, for context, my parents bought this small clock from a thrift store about 4 years ago. That's whenever my experience, and also subsequently my parents' experience, with this spirit or demon or whatever it is, really started to take fruition. Whenever my dad first hung the clock up on the wall, I got this sense of uneasiness, and it felt like something was watching me. I chalked it up to me just being paranoid at the time. Whenever I went to sleep that night, though, I was woken up at like 1 in the morning due to some knocking on my bedroom door. I didn't get up to get out of bed because I was afraid of what could hypothetically be on the other side. I ended up falling back to sleep, and I get up the next morning at around 11 in the morning. I was eating cereal at the kitchen table. My mum was making breakfast and had almost all the cabinets open, and my dad was outside working. Why does this information matter? Because all of a sudden, a bag of chips that I had in one of the cabinets gets literally flung across the kitchen. My mum was near the cabinet the chip bag had just got flung from, but I know for a fact that she didn't touch them. After that weird occurrence, nothing else really happened for like 2 straight days. Everything weirdly seemed to just go back to semi-normal again. Until everything just wasn't normal again. It was 11 p.m. on Friday in October of 2021. Me and my dad were both awake at that time, and we were just talking. He mentions that he feels something burning on his arm. He looks at it, and there's 3 scratches that had just appeared out of literally nowhere on his arm. All of a sudden, too, our box fan that we used to fall asleep to every night, it was just plugged in and in use, mind you, just turns off sort of randomly. I get up, walk out of my bedroom, and then the microwave turns on by itself, and then the kitchen light, and then the washing machine as well. And then every electronic and light that I'd mentioned was turned on, all got turned off together at the exact same time. Everything just goes suddenly quiet. Mind you, the power was still working. We checked that, so it was weird. The very next day after all of this, me and my dad got my grandparents to exorcise the house. I got some holy water, my grandmother had some anointing oil, my dad had a cross and some sage, and my grandpa had a Bible as well. Each of us go throughout the house, cleansing every last inch of it. After we were done, the house just suddenly began to smell like stink bugs for like 5 whole minutes. And then, just as quickly as it had arrived, it left. And nothing has happened since then. I mean, small things happen every now and again, like me waking up every single night in a cold sweat at 3 in the morning. But then again, I can't really sleep all that well, so it probably doesn't mean much. Oh, and I'm also really depressed now too. Like, I was super happy 3 weeks ago, but now I'm just sad and I find it hard to leave my room. So, my question for all of you guys is, have I been or am I living with a demon, a ghost? It's definitely something, because if it wasn't something, then I wouldn't be talking about it and asking for answers as to what this might possibly be, I guess. Is this something that I should just get used to, or is there something that I can do about it? I've never really experienced anything paranormal in my life until, well, just recently. To be honest, I wasn't fully sure that I believed in ghosts, but I like the stories, I guess. The other night, me and my best friend were having a sleepover at my house, and around 1:30 in the morning we decided to go down into my kitchen just to get some drinks. Now, I have a bathroom off my kitchen, so I decided to use it first thing. I walked in, closed the door behind me, and locked it. I live in an older house with not many renovations, so the lock in this door is one of those stupid ones that you have to push in until it clicks. I'm like 100% sure that I closed this door as well, but after halfway through me doing my business, the door suddenly flung open and the lock popped to be unlocked. I immediately tried to close it desperately because I was embarrassed, and when I tried to, it felt like someone was pushing on the door to open it. I opened it a little to see if it was my best friend, but no one was standing there. After that, it seemed to sort of let go, and I just closed it and continued on, weirded out, and quickening my pace to see what my best friend wanted, still telling myself that it was just him. When I walked out, he was halfway across the kitchen. I asked him if he opened the door on me, even though there wasn't a single chance that he did, and he obviously denied it. I just sort of shrugged it off and started pouring myself a drink. I then heard little light footsteps approaching me from behind, and I assumed it was my cat, but there was nothing there, and there was nobody there when I turned around. At this point, I'm not really scared, but just sort of confused, I guess. Me and my best friend wrapped up what we were doing, and we started heading upstairs. But in the end, me and my best friend just sort of wrapped up what we were doing, and we started heading up the stairs. From the top of my stairs, you can sort of still see into the entry of the kitchen, and I swear to you that I saw feet and legs standing there. I stared at it for a few seconds to make sure I just wasn't psyching myself out, or that it wasn't a shadow or something, but I know what it was. We quickly ran into the room and stayed up for a bit before we got my confidence to go to bed. That night, I had a terrible dream about this spirit in my kitchen, and it was extremely aggressive towards me. I woke up in a cold sweat, and I just couldn't sleep again. Around 2 p.m. the next day, my friend had left and my parents were at work, so I was alone. I was in the kitchen boiling some water on the stove when my electric kettle randomly turned on behind me, and I mean full speed boiling as if it had been boiling for minutes. I quickly turned around and I looked at it until I realized that it wasn't even plugged in. And I mean, there's no way that this kettle would work without being plugged in. I pushed the button to turn it off and then plugged it in to see what was going on, and now all of a sudden it won't work at all. I quickly went to my room and remained there until my parents got home after that, because it weirded me out with what happened the other night. Later that night, I was in my room and my TV turned on out of nowhere. I didn't sit on my remote or anything too. I mean, it was across the room entirely. Now it's 2 a.m. and an hour ago someone started aggressively banging on my bedroom door. My parents are asleep and snoring and the cat is on my bed. Nobody else is here, but the cat is freaking out, so I don't know. What should I do about this? So this happened when I was 15 and my little sister was 12. A little bit of backstory here too. We lived in this small town for several years and it was a pretty safe place. A few years into living there, we had a cop with his wife and kids move in 2 houses down from us. Our house was built sometime in the 1920s, and a few nights before this incident, our other siblings locked us out of the back door. Us being idiots, we kicked the back door in. The door didn't budge, but the frame came out of the wall and the door was just sort of hanging there. One of our blinds was broken. We didn't have the money to fix it. Seeing as my parents had 8 kids and money was tight growing up, there was just no way. Anyways, the blinds were broken behind our TV. On the other side of the window was a garage and our driveway. Next to the driveway on our neighbor's property, which was abandoned and had tall shrubs. But what we didn't know, though, was that there were 2 people hiding in the shrubs watching us. I'm going to try and leave some details out just to make a really long story short, but my little sister's name, her name is Candace, and my name is Aria. It was the summer of 2009. My oldest brother and his girlfriend were a mile from our house fishing, about 10 at night. All of our siblings and parents were asleep. Besides my oldest brother out with his girlfriend fishing, I was sitting in front of the TV watching it. Candace was sitting on the bed watching TV with me too. When all of a sudden, Candace and I heard a very loud crash, a noise from the back door. We both screamed. We got up, ran to the phone and called our brother's cell phone. He said that he was on his way because his girlfriend apparently twisted her ankle anyway. He gets home eventually, and by this point we woke everyone up in the house and had all the lights on. My brother tells us to stay in the house. My brother is 6'4" and 300 pounds. Unknown to my family though, I slipped outside to check with my brother. I know it was stupid of me to do this, but I was a curious kid. I saw my brother being really quiet. He ran back to our fenced-in backyard. He gets within arm's reach of this guy and he steps on a stick. The guy turns and looks back at my brother and takes off running and hops the fence, and he got away sadly. I didn't see this because I went into the house after a while, but this is what my brother said. My brother comes in. He tells everyone that he saw a guy all in black and he was about 6 foot. This is all that he saw apparently, and the rest of the night was pretty calm, but my brother was definitely on high alert. Now, the next night, my brother was out with his girlfriend, wherever they were at that time. It was again about 10 at night. Candace and I are watching TV again in the same spot as last time, and again we hear a loud crash coming from the back door. We screamed again and called our brother's cell phone. He came home again, the whole house was awake again, and all the lights were on as well. My brother goes out and checks it out. This time he didn't see anyone out there. Oh, and I forgot to mention too that both of these times we looked at the back door. Both times the back door looked like it was kicked in really hard. This time, around the frame was out of the wall more, and the door was leaning further into the house as well. We didn't make a police report because we had a cop that lived like 2 houses down from us, and while he was at work, us kids would help take care of his pregnant wife, bring her over food, play with her kids. We didn't really see him much. And when we did, he was so sweet and nice, but anyway, we told the police officer what had happened, and he told us that he thinks that there are 2 guys, that they've been stalking our house and watching us. The cop comes over and checks and looks. He said, I believe that there are 2 guys. One keeps lookout while the other one does the possible break-in apparently. He said that they've probably been looking through our broken blinds. He also said at night they could look in and you couldn't see anything if you look out. After those 2 nights, thankfully there was no attempt to break in anymore. But fast forward to the fall of that year, and our cop neighbor, he comes over one day and told us something. He said, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but we caught a peeping Tom. He's in jail now, about 20 or so miles away, and he said that after the peeping Tom got caught, everything around this neighborhood apparently stopped. That the town was safe again because it seemed to be this guy. Candace and I were obviously freaked out and scared, and to this day her and I have to have all of our doors and windows locked. In fact, we check multiple times a day. If any of our curtains are open, we sort of get a bit scared, so we close the curtains every time. Honestly, I'm pretty afraid that it'll happen again. Thankfully, we no longer live in that town, but that thought is still very much ever present. To this day, we don't know what their intentions were. We don't know if it was one or two guys, but I think that if he had gotten in, that honestly, we wouldn't be here today, and that is a very scary thought. About 2 years ago, I was 13, almost 14 at the time, and I was still quite immature for my age, and enjoyed role-playing as Mortal Kombat characters, or fighting with my little brother, who is now almost 13. By the way, I live in Whitefish, Montana, near a place called Olney, surrounded by woods pretty much. I also have horses basically everywhere on our property. That's important for later to know. Anyways, me and my little brother decided to go outside to the back of my house where there's a road that is about 400 feet in length, leading up to, I would say about maybe 8 round hay bales sort of section, to pretend to fight each other with wooden swords that we had custom detailed and made ourselves. I was cosplaying as Sub-Zero, and my brother was just wearing regular clothes, and we started walking away from our house towards the hay bales because we intended to fight on them. Now, once we had gotten about halfway there, which took like a minute, we were almost at the end of our horse pen that was fenced in next to our house, reaching out halfway to the bales. I remember my brother leaning down to tie one of his shoes that had a messed up lace on the right one, and, getting straight to the point, what we both saw still makes me very nervous and sweat when I think about it. I looked over at him and immediately heard a loud sort of trampling or sprinting sound coming from the hay bale area. I looked up and at them, and I saw what I thought to be something resembling a human, but was extremely tall. The hay bales were stacked 2 up and I think 4 across, and whatever this was, it was greyish-white and ran behind the bales in what I assume a pretty much straight line, then going past them and disappearing into the woods that went from behind the hay all the way around my house, besides the main gravel road that then brings you to the highway. I immediately freaked out and tried to yell to my brother right beside me, but only managed to basically talk super fast to him with an inside voice. He as well looked up very quickly because he had heard the running too. There was a sort of small pause where my brother sounded confused, and then, right as he did it, it came back running to the hay bales once again, stopping this time behind the 3rd row, of 2 stacked on one another. This thing, though, was so tall that we could see almost the entirety of the thing's head, and then it ran kind of forward a little bit, and then straight backwards towards the woods, never to be seen after that. Now, this all happened in the span of maybe about 5 or 8 seconds, and saying that whatever this thing was running is really a complete understatement. You see, it had been running at least 40 miles an hour, at least, or fast enough where we could both barely make out what it looked like in detail, just the overall appearance. What I remember, though, is that it looked to me as kind of like the rake, but way taller and more slender looking and really grey. I remember my brother yelling, "What the heck was that?" And literally, so did I, as we full-on bolted back to the house in probably 15 seconds. I got there first, yanked my brother in the door, and slammed it harder than any other door I've slammed in my life, locking it behind us quickly. Of course, my parents didn't believe us at all, even though I was on the verge of either tears or a heart attack from the adrenaline. They said that it was probably a moose in the end, but I've seen moose at that time and since then, and this, I can assure you, was no moose. Hopefully I'll get a better answer here than from them, but if not, that's okay, I guess, and to be honest, I really just do hope people believe me. It feels like a dream thinking back on it, just as it did the day after the incident. It's kind of weird too that I remembered this again suddenly today while watching a military crawler horror story on YouTube. Probably because my mind is trying to block out as a false memory or a dream, whatever that event was, even though I actually have a second eyewitness in my brother. And quite honestly, if my brother wasn't there with me, I seriously would doubt myself. I would doubt that I would ever believe what I actually saw. But because he saw it too, and we both freaked out at what it was, I have no doubt in my mind that I'm not crazy, and we saw something. Years ago, when I was pregnant, we were just getting ready to go to bed, and it was late, about 1:30 in the morning, when this woman knocked on the door, and my husband answered. She was clearly high and jittery and looking around everywhere. She asked if she could use my toilet. My husband obviously said no, this was not a public restroom. We both got a really bad vibe from her though. She was quite a big woman and clearly something just wasn't right with her. She started to try to open our security door at that point, rattling the handle, but we've always been very conscious of keeping it locked the minute that we walk in. My husband told her to go away and he shut the door. Then she started banging on the door, screaming that she needed to use the toilet. My husband opened the door again and told her to get lost or he was calling the cops. She stopped, froze, and for about 20 seconds just sort of stood there, staring at us, and then she turned around and walked away. We turned off all the lights and we looked through the blinds and saw her next door talking to two people at that point. I said to my husband that I think that was a setup for a home invasion, and he agreed. The thing though is that I'd actually seen this woman around before quite a few times, so she could have known that I was heavily pregnant, and that would make us a good target, because we would have been compliant. People have a tendency to be more compliant when they're trying to protect their family, and I think that she must have followed me home. Thankfully, after that, I never saw her again, but even that is kind of weird, right? We were on a road trip to Queensland and back. We were in no hurry, so we were taking the scenic route. And at one stage, we pulled up to a truck stop on a highway that ran alongside the forest. It was a very isolated place. So we were sitting there trying to get my son some snacks and just having a break, when a ute pulled up behind us. The guy inside sat there for ages, just sort of staring at us, and I said to my husband, "This guy's creeping me out, let's go." So we started to pack up, and that's when he got out of his ute. He was walking towards us as we got in our car, and before we knew it, he was there, and he asked for a cigarette. My husband said that he only smokes rollies, and he didn't have any rolled, and the guy said, "I'll wait." He never said more than that in the entire encounter. He leaned in and he stared at me with the creepiest predatory look that I've ever seen, and this really weird grin, the whole time keeping one hand behind him as well. Suddenly, he leant right into the car, and at that moment, my 2-year-old said hi, and it was then that this guy just backed away like his butt was on fire. Didn't wait for his cigarette, he just bolted back to his ute and we took off. We always thought that he had bad intentions and just didn't realize that we had a kid in the car, and when he did, that maybe threw him off. We both agree that it was the creepiest encounter of our lives, and we were pretty sure of his intentions. The really creepy thing though is that it wasn't until we were driving away that we realized that we were in the Belanglo State Forest where serial killer Ivan Milat had buried all of his victims. There was always a theory that he didn't actually do the work alone, and that actually one of his brothers was involved, but who knows. Anyway, that might not be related to this story at all, but it always just crossed my mind. When I was about 7 or 8, my family moved into an old farmhouse in VA. I have a little brother. My brother is 3 years younger than me, so he was around 4 or 5 at the time. This house had an upstairs which had 2 rooms. My brother and I were very excited about this because we always had to share a room. He picked the room to the left of the stairs, It was nice, but in the corner of his room it had a tiny door that led into a sort of small attic. It gave me an eerie feeling, so I couldn't understand why he would pick that room, but he was just determined on that being his room. I, though, took the room to the right, which had a little window that looked out over the farm. It was great. We set our rooms up and we unpacked. Fast forward to a few weeks later, my mum decided that it was time for us to take a nap. In my room, of course. For context, I had a little red rocking chair with Dalmatians with my name painted on it. It was really cute. I had definitely outgrown it at this point though, because it was made for me when I was a toddler. And well, when we went to lay down for our nap, everything was okay. But then, out of nowhere, my brother started freaking out and screaming, clinging to my mother for dear life. My mother tried to soothe him, but nothing was helping. She asked my brother what was wrong. My brother pointed to the rocking chair and said, "There's a little girl in Sissy's chair, and she doesn't want us up here." He was so inconsolable that my mum had to bring us downstairs. That is the first time the entity made herself known. I never saw her, but I'd always feel her presence or have nightmares about her. The weird thing is that I'd only see her in my dreams if I was in my room sleeping. So as you can imagine, that quickly turned into my brother and I sleeping in my mum's bed. Most of the time she would target my brother, but he'd never stay in his room. And one night, my mum talks to me and my brother into sleeping in my bed upstairs just to have a break. We only agreed to do it if we could leave the light room on. She agreed. Well, we all fall asleep and I wake up in my room. I'm alone. Everything is the same, but like I said, I'm alone and something is telling me to get up and go to the window. I don't know why, but I do. As soon as I get to the window, though, I see a little girl run to the side of the house and start crawling up the side to my window. Remember, I'm on the second floor. I'm sort of startled awake before she can reach me, and I sit up in bed and realize that I'm reliving my dream. I'm panicking, staring at the window, and again something is telling me to go over to it. But instead, I just dart down the stairs to my mum's room and find my brother laying on the floor near the end of my mum's bed. We didn't say much to each other besides agreeing, and we felt safe and near mum. I learned years later that my brother had the same dream that night, apparently. Fast forward a couple of years later, we moved to a new home. We had to share rooms again, but we were fine with that. We were scared from all the years of dealing with this entity. We thought that we would finally have some peace, but we were very wrong. Shortly after moving, the same stuff started happening again. This time, I actually saw her. It was dark out, and my mum needed something from her car. I tell her that I'll go and get it, and as soon as I retrieved what she needed from the car, I turn around toward the house to go back in, but I look over into the field next to our house and I see her appear and disappear, and every time she reappeared, she was a little bit closer. I never ran so fast in my life. I ran into the house absolutely hysterical. I told my mum and stepdad, and they were obviously concerned. Mum didn't believe that she had followed us to the new house, but now she did. We made the conclusion that she attached herself to my rocking chair, so we moved again, and when we did, we left my rocking chair at that house, and since then we haven't seen her and I haven't dreamed about her. Growing up after this, I always wondered if she was just an evil entity or maybe a demon in disguise. I don't know, but something told me that there was something wrong with her. I do some volunteering at a hospital 3 times a week that involves me reporting to the hospital at 5 a.m. I enjoy the volunteering. I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, and I've really never had any issues. Until last week. Last week, I was a bit early on one of my volunteering days, and I had about 30 minutes before I had to report in. I normally would have just waited in my car, but I had been pretty stressed about things in my personal life, so I thought that I'd go for a little walk to burn a little steam and clear my head. After all, this is in a pretty nice area, upscale West Los Angeles, So what could go wrong? It's like 4:30 in the morning, so naturally the streets are all quiet, but it seems pretty peaceful. But then, up ahead, I see somebody walking in my direction. Kind of odd, I guess, but I didn't think too much of it. Him being out here at this hour isn't inherently suspicious, I guess. After all, does being out here at this hour automatically make me suspicious too? So I keep walking. We make quick eye contact when we cross paths, and I suddenly got a very bad feeling about this man. I can't explain it other than an instant instinct, but sometimes you just have a gut feeling about somebody, you know? That's what I felt when I passed this man, and I immediately went on high alert and made sure that he wasn't going to approach me from behind or something. Very soon after walking by this man, I'm talking like 15 to 20 seconds, I passed by one of those many parked cars on the street. This is Los Angeles, so there's a lot of parked cars on the sides of the main streets. Except this parked car is different. There's a man sitting at the wheel, and the man waves at me and beckons me over. Again, pretty darn creepy, but not inherently worth freaking out over just yet. As I keep walking, I then realize that while the car was parked, it wasn't off. It was simply in park. Because this car starts driving in the same direction that I'm walking, and it drives at a pace essentially matching my walking speed, at this point, I've had enough, and my brain is saying nope. So I immediately turn around and start speed walking back in the direction that I came from. Then I saw something in that moment that absolutely terrified me. That first man that I encountered walking the other direction, which was probably like 40 seconds ago, was now standing pretty close to me, like way, way closer than somebody who had been walking in the other direction should be. And then he makes eye contact with me, and he starts walking in my direction. I am incredibly suspicious and more than a bit nervous at this point, so because it's pretty dark out, I decide to play a hunch. My car keys fold out in a manner very similar to a switchblade, so I immediately pull it out, press the button to make the key fold out, and I stare at him for a second. I believe that he was caught off guard because he stopped walking for a second. And well, that second was all I needed. I immediately took off running at top speed, crossed the street. We're talking a Los Angeles main street with like 6 lanes of traffic and a median divider, and kept running down the street. Now, I'm no Olympian, but I was on the cross-country team at a D2 college, and I still run multiple times a week, so I'm pretty confident that I can outrun the average person I run into by a comfortable margin. Still, I didn't take any chances, and I ran all the way back to the hospital. So, what do you guys think? I'm not crazy, right? I'm not necessarily saying that I was going to be the next prominent murder victim or kidnapping victim, but there was definitely something going on here, right? So for the last 2 months, there's been some instances where I've woken up at around 3 or 4 in the morning to use the restroom, and have noticed my daughter's door open after we definitely closed it when laying her down. We live in a smallish 2-bedroom apartment. Our daughter's room is directly across from ours, and we typically sleep with our bedroom door open so we can hear her in the night if she needs us. We usually lay her down at around 8:30 p.m, and my wife and I are usually in bed at around 10. Our daughter has a Nest White noise machine that we leave on in her room to help her sleep. When her door is shut, you can barely hear it. When I get up in the middle of the night, though, I immediately know that her door is open, just off of the sound alone. And then I look across and her door is not just open a crack, but completely wide open. I just have this eerie feeling. My wife and I don't sleepwalk, and when I'm up in the middle of the night, I'm pretty aware of my surroundings. Also, to add to this, our daughter sleeps in a crib and is way too small to crawl out of it, and usually when I notice her door is open, I always go and check on her, and she's always knocked out. There's just no reason why this door should be open, and I don't know, something is telling me that something is wrong. Anyway, I apologize if this sounds a bit rambling. It's just giving me weird vibes, and I was looking to see if anyone had any ideas of what might be going on. This happened about 2 years ago. Me, my fiancée, and my best friend decided to go to this popular hiking trail near us. The trail leads to a giant rock that hangs off of a cliff. It's a beautiful look over the city that I live in, and it's a far walk through the woods. You're on the same trail going straight for most of the hike. The trail eventually makes a sharp turn, gets thinner, and gets very steep. You really have to hike up this part though, and then you reach an open field. You can see the rock above you, and you have to climb up one more path that leads you to the rock. Now, even though the hike is long, the path is very easy and it's hard to mess up, considering that this is the only path in that area of the woods, that I've found at least. I've done it multiple times at this point, even hiked down well after midnight, after watching fireworks on the 4th of July. But anyway, the three of us decided, since we were walking close to the road that leads you to the trail, that we were going to go and visit. It was about 7 p.m, so it started to get dark pretty quickly. But we didn't even make it off the first part of the trail that I already mentioned. It goes straight for about an hour until you get to the sharp turn. We didn't even make it to that, and we decided that since it was getting dark that we should probably turn around. But we all had our flashlights on and everything was normal. We never set foot on the path. The path is pretty much dark engulfed by the trees, but there is this one spot where the trees open up. You can see the entire downtown area of my city, and it feels very high up because this trail is basically in the middle of the hillside surrounding the whole town. If you've ever been to Pennsylvania, then you'll get it. Anyway, we got to the spot where the clearing is, where you can see downtown, but it sort of looked flip-flopped. I don't even really know how to explain it, but it looked like the town was sort of flipped, like how you can flip an image on your phone almost. Like someone took the town and flipped it the other way, if you get it. It was late and dark, and we were tired of walking, so I just don't think that we really took it seriously when we walked past it. I still felt the weird feeling though, and I felt like everything was sort of backwards all of a sudden. That's really the only way that I can describe it, as backwards. And we all said the same thing to each other. It was my fiancé who said something first, which is just weird because usually he'd be the last to say anything in a situation like this. All he said, though, was that he feels backwards. My best friend freaked out because she gets anxiety like that, and she felt the same way, too. I mentioned the clearing looked weird at this point, and they all agreed with me. They thought the same thing, but they thought that they were being silly. At this point, though, we should be close to the exit, but honestly, it felt like we were sort of going in circles. The path started breaking like the path wasn't even the same that we'd been walking on, so we turned back around towards the rock to try to figure out where we were. We came back to the clearing and it still looked weird, so we took pictures, and I do have them still if anyone cares to see them, but you wouldn't be able to make out that it looks flip-flopped unless you live in the same town. We knew that we were at the clearing though because, well, it's really the only part where the wood's clear like this, and we knew that we were on the right path as we've never got off of it. We decided to turn back around towards the exit, but it just didn't bring us to the exit. It also didn't bring us to the path that looked wrong and started to break. It was a whole new part of the woods, in fact, that we'd never even seen before. At some point as well, we sort of stumbled across a door in the ground. It looked like a door to a mine maybe or something. We tried to take a look at it, but there was no evidence of a mine being there. There are multiple mines in my city though, so I wouldn't be surprised if this was just an old one and wasn't on record or something. But beside the door was about 5 or 6 white chairs with what seemed to be white sheets laying on the ground around them, like a little piece of white cloth. Not very big, just pieces. There were also beer bottles. The chair was in a circle formation, but there was no fire pit in the middle or anything, just this circle of chairs. Looking back, it could have been a little campsite someone had made, but man, was it scary at night when you're lost to find something like this. It genuinely freaked us out, and every time we walked away, it just seemed that we just made our way back to the chairs and the door again. Obviously, we started to try to call and text people that we know for help, even called my parents, but nobody answered. It was late, so I guess that sort of made sense, but we were so lost and getting really scared, and we were going to have to sleep up here at this point, we thought. And eventually, after walking what seemed to be in circles forever, we just sort of walked out. Like, so fast the exit was right there, we just walked on the path for a minute and we were out, just like that. Almost immediately after we leave, I then get texts back from people that I was trying to get help from. And one more creepy thing, just to put the icing on the cake as well, is that there were like 1,032 pictures taken on my fiance's phone at 10:32 p.m. Like a burst of them. If you have an iPhone, they have these things called bursts where you can take a lot of pictures quickly. It was just so weird. The pics were all just white and it just made no sense. It's also weird how his phone took pictures while he had his flashlight on at the same time. The pics were taken during the time that we were lost, and we didn't go back for about a year until me and my fiancé decided to go back and try and find the path that we made it onto at some point, just for peace of mind in the end. But no matter how hard we searched, and I mean we searched pretty thoroughly to find this thing, we couldn't find the door, we couldn't find anything weird, no extra paths, no flip-flop of the city, except a giant meat grinder at one point. I don't know what that was about, but man, I hate the woods so much. It freaks me out thinking about any woods or forests of any time. That's just one of the worst experiences for me though, but I've had a few others, and honestly I just hope people don't think that I'm making this all up. I know that it sounds crazy, to me even, so I can imagine someone thinking that I'm lying, but I'm really just looking for a possible explanation for any of this. It's one of those things that just sits with me and bothers me to this day, and my fiancé doesn't like talking about it either because there's just really no explanation. Me and my best friend, we still talk about it from time to time, but it just goes nowhere because we've thought of every possible explanation that we can think of. So, any similar experiences or theories would honestly be great. When I was 18 and freshly broken up with my older boyfriend, I basically went crazy with dating guys. At the time, I also dressed very goth, even going as far as to wear a real corset and trench coat, mostly just enjoying the attention. One particular afternoon, though, my friend or roommate at the time decided to eat at a local Japanese restaurant, with both of us all dressed up. Our waiter was a mediocre skinny white guy who clearly was a little alternative, but it was hard to tell really with the uniform. We joked about me leaving my phone number on the receipt or something, so I hyped myself up and I did it. Late that night, he had sent me a text at some point. We talked for a few days, never really having a right time to meet up as I worked 40 minutes away from where I lived. He mentioned the boots that he wore meant a lot to him and some other odd things that just seemed like edgy jokes, I guess. One really late night though, coming home, I was texting and driving, as any 18-year-old does, and we decided to meet up. I was stupid enough to invite him over to my apartment, where it was just me and the roommate who had been with me before. Our other two roommates were not at home at this point. At first, it was fine too because I was already drunk, so I would just let him rant about whatever he wanted. He went on about his life, going to jail, medical bills, his parents, etc. Eventually though, he asked me if I wanted to see his tattoos, and I was like, sure. He lifted up his shirt, and not only could I see the handgun tucked in his waistband, but also his multiple badly covered up racist tattoos. One was even slightly covered up with a banana. I don't know what it was, but I simply decided the best way to deal with this situation was just to appease him, so I went along with it casually. I don't remember exactly every detail because it was over 2 years ago and I was drunk, but he ended up pulling his gun out and putting it to my head, asking me if I was scared. I was immensely confused, and I tried to call his bluff saying that I wasn't, which got him to put it away for a while. When we went to hook up in my messy room, he pulled it out on me again, saying that he wanted to do it with it out. I got mad and tried to fight him off and get it away from my head. Of course, I wasn't as strong as him, and he hit me in the arm with it. And I mean, if you've ever been pistol whipped with a gun, then you'll know exactly how much that hurts. When I finally got him off of me and he realized that I was angry, not scared, he started acting like a crackhead, saying that I was crazy for not caring about him pulling a gun on me. He ran off, jumping the fence of the apartment complex, and not even taking his car that he had come in. In the morning, his car was gone and I had a large bruise from where he had hit me. And while to me it was a funny story for quite some time, I now realize just how bad it could have all ended. I was asleep with my small baby and woke up for some reason, 3-something in the morning, and I felt someone grab my foot. A coldish, larger hand grabbed the tips of my toes or the top of my foot. Well, I at first thought that I was dreaming and my feet were out of the covers, so I decided to just go back to sleep. I put that one foot under the cover, left the other foot out, because I like sleeping with my feet out, and I was almost back asleep when I felt a thumb with pressure slide up my foot, and then a hand grab with intense pressure the top of my foot. At that, I immediately shot up. My body was having intense reactions at this point, goosebumps, rapid heartbeat, etc. I yelled my sister's name because she's the only one who had a key to my condo, and I looked under the bed and everywhere in the room. I was terrified for quite some time after that, but it never did happen again. Until just the other day. So, I'm in a completely different city now with my husband and second baby. My husband, he left for work early in the morning at like 4 a.m. He said goodbye and I was half asleep with my feet out. And about a minute after he closed the door to leave, something grabbed my foot, the top of my foot, the same way that it happened before, but it was only once this time. I went to go and see if my toddler was in bed, and she was fast asleep. But I guess I'm just scared. I can't tell if this thing is bad or good or what it even actually is. I told my husband and he believes me, but he has no idea what it is and no good ideas to put forward. I guess I just really want to know what it is, and so if you have any ideas as to what I should do, then please do let me know. I live in rural southwest VA in Appalachia, and I heard odd whistling in the woods a few days ago at night. It all started when I was playing airsoft alone in the woods at about 7 p.m. in almost pitch black. Yes, I live a pretty lonely existence, and was walking around the woods behind my house. I got to a clearing on top of a hill and sat down to take a rest. But just when I sat down, I heard this odd whistling. It was perfect whistling, and whistled a tune that I'd never heard before. It was clear and it sounded close, at least within 150 feet or maybe even less, and came directly from behind me. It would have had to have been in the woods and near the property line with one of our neighbors. It instantly gave me chills down my back though, and I got the feeling of being watched. I, not being an idiot and having a brain, wasted no time in sprinting full speed down towards my house, hopping over rocks and limbs and all that. The whistling stopped shortly after I got moving, but I still felt like I was being watched and like something was just off. I didn't see anything when I did turn back to look while opening a gate, that is, but that may be because of the darkness and the distance that I had moved. To be clear as well, there was no way that it was a bird, as the leaves on the trees haven't regrown yet, and plus it didn't sound like one. It still stays cold at night as well, and sometimes during the day even, but I don't know that much about birds, I guess. What I will say though is that there were also no birds to be seen, and everything else was really quiet. I also sort of doubt though that it was a person, as I heard no talking, no leaves crunching, no other noises in fact. I should also mention the whistling started sort of out of nowhere, and it didn't get gradually louder or anything, as if someone or something was moving closer while whistling. I've been in those woods a decent amount of my life, and I've never heard anything like it before, not even once. I'll admit that I was a bit tired, but I've been more tired before while being up in those woods at a similar time, and I'm definitely not one to hallucinate or anything. The whole situation still gives me chills when I think about it. I've had the feeling of being watched before in those woods, but those feelings have never been so intense and extreme as that one night. I was sort of hoping if anyone might have known what this was, that they might be able to give me some feedback. Was it an animal? Maybe, but me and my family have dogs around the house, and most wild animals stay away, and I haven't really seen anything outside of a bear or two and deer in those woods. I should also mention the dogs occasionally bark randomly into the woods, but they weren't really barking at that moment when the whistling happened. And quite honestly, I was just sort of hoping that someone could identify what this was. I'm not saying that it was paranormal or anything, but I'm also not saying that it was just a wild animal. It was too weird to be just that, I think. Many years ago, when my daughter was potty training, a friend recommended that I keep a travel potty with me. It saved me from rushing to find a restroom and avoiding stopping in any way questionable with a toddler. We would drive about 40 minutes to pick up my husband on his lunch break, and that afternoon we were headed back to drop him off at work, and we're only about a block from the restaurant when my daughter said that she had to go. The area that we had just headed into, it was a large business park area with lots of very large buildings to the left and the right. I saw one and the parking lot looked empty. I pulled over to the side of the building and I parked at the curb. I had 2 car seats taking up my back seat and my husband in the passenger seat, so I took my daughter out of the car and sat her up in the trunk to use the potty. I just got her settled and she was looking uncomfortable and covering her face and looking down. I looked behind me and I see a woman walking up to me. It was summer at the time and very warm, but she was wearing a jeans skirt and tank top and had a crossbody purse. She looked at my daughter and said, "Don't be embarrassed, we all go through it," and just laughed. She said that she needed a ride to the freeway and asked if I could take her. I told her that I was sorry, but I couldn't, and she started to seem bothered by that and asked why I couldn't take her. I said my back seat is full, so I don't have room for her, and she snapped back, "So you're telling me you put your daughter in the front seat?" I told her no, that my husband was in the front seat. And as soon as she heard that I wasn't alone and had my husband with me, she started to slowly back away and she was walking down the street that she came from. As she was walking away, she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I used to be from here, but not anymore," and quickly walked off. If she would have made a left on the cross street she was walking towards when going towards my car, there were restaurants and gas stations a block up, plenty of people to ask for a ride. So the fact that she went the other way has always troubled me. I still am very grateful my husband was with me that day. I don't know what her true intentions were, but getting to a populated area really didn't seem to be one of them. Back when I waitressed, I pulled into my mum's driveway at around 8 p.m, and I remember that I was excited because it was an early night for me and I'd been working 3 jobs at the time. The neighborhood was quiet and nobody else was really around, no cars driving by or anything. I was scrolling on my phone in my car when I just got a terrible feeling and a chill down my spine. Something was telling me to get out of the car at this point, so I got out and slammed my door when I heard this gut-wrenching scream. My first thought was that a raccoon was being eaten or a cat had gotten run over or something. I couldn't pin it, what it was, because it was just so disturbing. I'll never forget it though. It had so much pain and terror in it. I looked around me to find the source and noticed a figure across the street, standing in the grass next to the street curb. The street light was in front of my house, so I could make out some details. It was a girl with long hair covering her face and a long white dress. She had no shoes on. My first thought was kidnap victim for some reason, and I wanted to call out, "Are you okay?" but something inside of me told me to hold back. She didn't move or look up, I probably stood there a minute too long contemplating what I was seeing and if she needed help or not, but ultimately my gut told me to get inside, now. Without turning my back to her, I opened my garage door and I backed in, my eyes never leaving her, and she didn't move even an inch. I stood and watched as the garage door closed, and she was still there. I ran inside, turned on the house alarm, and ran to the front window to see if I could still see her, but I couldn't. Then, I ran to my bedroom window upstairs because that would have been a perfect view of her, but she was gone. I slept with the lights on that night. My mum says the neighborhood kids were playing a prank on me, but honestly, none of them were her shape or size or looked like her. I've seen them all. When I told the story to some friends, some of them mentioned a banshee. While no one in my family passed away, I did have a near-death experience 3 months later. I don't know if it's related, but I think it's probably worth mentioning that. Anyway, I'm curious as to what others think. Was I just being pranked, or did I see something that night? And if I did, what exactly did I encounter? And more importantly, why? So my boyfriend, now husband, moved into this house with 3 of his buds when we were 19. Built in 1909, you could only expect it to come with some history, right? Well, his room was on the main floor, and I'd spent evenings over just visiting. I came over after work one day, and he was all worked up going, "I swear this house is haunted. I'm losing it." He explained that as he did laundry, the dryer kept turning off, and he would walk to the basement to find the door open. On his 3rd trip to the basement, he just snapped. He yelled and swore and told the ghost to get lost. He slammed the dryer door and then walked back up to his room. The laundry completed and the door didn't open again. After explaining this to me, I realized that it was already 11:30 p.m. and I had to drive home still. He was a bit on edge, but I just told him that he needs to apologize and understand that this was probably their home at one point in time. They're just messing with him for a reaction. I kissed him goodnight and walked into the kitchen towards the front door to leave. I stopped in the doorway, felt the need to look over my right shoulder, and see the elements on the stove beat red. They were all turned on at full heat and had been on for a while, clearly. The kitchen was really hot. The stovetop itself was dang hot. I casually walked over, turned off all the elements and said, "Please stop, he's harmless." Boyfriend begged me to stay and I was like, "You gotta fight your own battles. You need to apologize and just go to sleep, you silly goose." The old man never left. It was his house at one point. He made certain everyone knew that he was still the boss. I sometimes enjoyed his tricks. I ended up moving in with the boys 3 months after the stove incident. Nothing too scary ever really happened. Just sort of regular ghost stuff, but it was kind of like Casper, I guess. Some people might find that odd, but I guess when you've had your fair share of paranormal encounters, things like this just don't seem to faze you anymore. So I was driving home at about 9:30 p.m. My route contains a variety of areas, including some single-lane, quiet roads. Driving along one of these single-lane roads, I end up having to slow down because of a man standing in the middle of the road, facing away from my car. Now, I have my full beams on at this point, so there's no way that he doesn't know that I'm driving behind him. He apparently just decides to wait until I've come to almost a complete stop before turning around. Just turning around, that is. No sign that he's going to move out of the road or anything. I'm of course worried about this guy, thinking that, I don't know, maybe he needs help or something. He doesn't seem to be visibly intoxicated from what I can tell, and he doesn't appear injured or confused, so I assume that he's mostly okay. After a little while of standing, he raises his arms in a well kind of motion. I don't know if he was expecting me to back up or hit him or what, so I decided to sound my horn to try and nudge him along a bit, as I just want to get home. And this makes him flip out completely. He closes the distance to my car and starts pounding on it, yelling at me like crazy. I can't hear what he's saying, but he does this for what must have only been a few seconds, felt way longer at the time, before rounding the side of my car and punching the driver's side window at full force. Fortunately, it held up and it didn't crack. The second that I know that he's out of the way, though, I absolutely floor it and get the heck out of there, happy in the knowledge that he couldn't catch up to me. So yeah, that was a really creepy random encounter and hopefully my last one. I do hope that Mr. Spooky Car Puncher is okay and getting whatever help it is that he might need, though probably best to start with a doctor for his likely broken hand. This happened back in 2018. I was 24 and my sister was 25. We are both native New Yorkers and there are plenty of stories that I have. I think we all know that New York is a bit strange, but anyway, we were on a crowded train going to meet up with a friend. There were no seats, so we were holding onto this pole. It's already a bit of a tight squeeze, but this man and this girl, not related, get on and hold the pole that my sister and I are both holding. We're both talking, and I notice the man directly in front of us keeps on looking at us, like really looking. I'm already feeling uncomfortable as it is, and it's hard not to pay attention. I just try to ignore it by talking to my sister in the end. By the way, we are nowhere near our destination. A couple of train stops later, though, he eventually says to us, "Are you guys sisters?" We both sort of look at one another, feeling awkward, and I'm like, yeah? At this point, I'm praying that the train would hurry up to the next stop so that we could get off. I know that my sister is thinking the same thing. The other girl is looking at us, and she looks uncomfortable too. He smiles and seems to get excited, if you know what I mean. He then says to us, "Oh, you guys are sisters, huh?" in an incredibly perverted tone. He then licks his lips and keeps looking from my sister to me back and forth. At this point, the girl gives us an awkward smile and she looks just as terrified as we do. I can tell that this man is getting really excited by the fact that we said that we were sisters and comments about how beautiful we are. My sister looks at me and we see a stop coming up. We both know that it's not our stop, but at this point, we were just leaving the train. He keeps trying to talk to us and we keep ignoring him, and as soon as the doors open, we leave. Again, I've been in many weird and uncomfortable situations, but the fact that he was literally so close to us with his perverted smile, his excited eyes, and, well, excited you know what. Yeah, I'm glad that we were able to get away from him safely, and thankfully, he didn't follow us. So I shared a story with you guys a little while back. One of them was about a deer person or something out there where my grandmother lives. I don't live there anymore, and I live 45 minutes away from her, but yeah, that was me. Anyways, I took out my dog tonight. My dog was peeing and I was on my phone, but we live in an apartment complex with thick woods in the back. My dog started growling, which is weird because, well, he never does. That's when I looked over and he was, and I'm honestly shaking thinking about it, but with my physical eyes, I see this 6.5 or 7 foot deer thing again. But first thought was it was a Wendigo. I mean, it was thin and skinny with very wet fur, the deer skull and all that. It didn't seem to have eyes from where I was standing, but I could tell that it was staring right at us. It didn't move, didn't even make a sound. At that, I began to pull my dog back, and I looked back because I stepped on a stick, and when I did, it moved to the other side of the tree. I kind of yelled instinctively, "You can't follow or harm me, go back." It didn't move, and I dragged my dog into the house and quickly shut the door. My wife asked why I slammed the door so hard, and I just told her that the dog was being weird. She just doesn't believe in that stuff. Anyway, I went back out a few minutes ago, which was about an hour after it happened, and there was no sign of it. I'm really shaken up by this because, quite honestly, after I moved, I thought that this was all over. Okay, So, to start this, I want to say that I'm now an adult, 28-year-old male, and this story, it happened when I was around 15 years old, and to date, it still blows my mind. For context, when I was 15, I was a little bit of a pothead. I loved smoking, so whenever I got the chance, which was basically every day, I would get high with my friends. We'll come back to that later, but I grew up in a town in the UK that was pretty big for a town. We had nearly 100,000 residents, so yeah, pretty big. Where I used to live was in like an estate full of houses. I had a best friend at the time who lived about 20 to 25 minute walk from my house, but in order to get there, you had to walk through a wooded area that led to a big lake. You would walk around it to get to near his house. So one day, randomly I was out with my friend, who I just mentioned, plus many others, when we noticed a lot of police presences in the area near the woods. Plus there was a police helicopter up in the air too. Being curious as we were, we followed the police to the woodlands that separated our houses. We went through the woods to the lake where the police and ambulance workers were. They were amongst many bystanders at this point. We got there and started asking people what had happened, and we were told that a young boy around the age of 7 had drowned in the lake near the path where everybody was gathering. Over the next couple of days, police were trawling the lake looking for the child who they knew was there because his friend ran for help when he fell in and couldn't get out. And 2 or 3 days after he slipped into the lake, authorities found the young boy's body, which was big news in my town. No later than 24 hours after the boy was found, the local council installed a black metal bench on the footpath near where he died with a little plaque commemorating his life. Now, that very next day, I was out with my friend over near where I lived. We were getting high with a bunch of other friends that we knew, and by the time that we were done, we decided to go back to his house to sleep because my mum would have gone crazy over the fact that we were smoking. We started to walk back to his house at around 11 p.m. It was really dark out now. We passed my house and eventually got to the woods. We walked through the woods and got to the start of the lake. We started walking down the side of the lake, down the path towards where the kid had drowned and the bench was. We were just talking nonsense as high teens did when I noticed that when the bench got into sight that there was a man sat on the bench. Now, I was a bit freaked out by this, but I didn't say anything yet. It was 11 p.m. near the woods in the dark, and it was creepy to say the least, but when I got a little bit closer, I noticed that I could see that the man was wearing something like a priest perhaps. You know, sort of like black jacket, white collar. And upon seeing this priest, I sighed some relief because I just assumed that he was praying or something of the sort for the kid that had drowned in that spot about 4 days earlier. So after noticing this priest, I just sort of watched him sit there. And as I got closer and closer, I didn't say anything to my friend, who was right next to me, but we collectively stopped talking once he noticed the man too. As we got closer, it was more obvious that he was a priest, and then once we got within about 5 meters of him, he was just all of a sudden gone. Like gone. I felt like I blinked and he had just disappeared. When we were walking past the actual bench where I saw him sat, there was nobody there anymore. But if he was to have gotten up and walked away, I definitely would have seen him. I mean, it's a one-track walkway. In any case, after I got to the bench, I turned to my friend, who was just as confused and spooked as I was, it seemed. I asked if he had just seen that man sat on the bench. I didn't want to say what type of man because the way that he was dressed was very obvious as to what type of man he was. But as I asked him, "Did you see that man?" he said, "Yeah, the guy dressed like a priest." When I tell you that my heart sank, I cannot explain that feeling or that situation to this day. What gets me though is that I purposely asked my friend if he had seen the man, and he corrected me by saying the man was a priest. And if it was a person, they would have had to have gotten up and walked from us in straight line down the path, which we would have seen, or they would have had to have walked past us, but no. When we got close, this guy just disappeared. Still to this day, it's my only paranormal experience, but it blows my mind every single time that I think about it. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, my best friend was given a Ouija board for her birthday. We loved that thing too. For months, we would sit there with it after school, talking with what we thought were our deceased relatives. I now know that that was a lie. You can only really communicate with the demonic through this medium, or at least that's what I believe. Eventually, a spirit wouldn't leave her board though. His name was Steve, which is kind of ironic because that is also our creepy neighbor's name. Anyways, Steve wouldn't leave the board, even though we'd asked to speak with our grandparents and other relatives. Our relationship with Steve became more and more violent the longer that we communicated with him. He would threaten our pets and even our own lives in the end. We kind of thought it was exciting until one day he took it too far. This day, we brought a third friend to play with us. We were sitting in a circle like normal with our ankles crossed near the board. After playing for a bit and realizing that it was Steve, we decided to say goodbye. Only this time, we didn't finish the goodbye because when we looked down, all 3 of us had scratches on our ankles. We snatched our hands away and stood up very quickly, thus ending the conversation without saying goodbye. Big mistake. We decided then that we needed to get rid of that board, so we brought it on a little walk with us to the neighborhood pond. I held the triangle piece, my best friend held the board, and the third friend had the box. We threw each of them in different locations in the same pond, and we walked away feeling like $1,000,000, chanting "Screw Steve" and everything else. It was only later that night that we realized that we had royally messed up. At 3 a.m. exactly, I woke up. The energy in my room, all I can say is that it felt really off. It was darker than usual. The shadows were blacker than usual. But then I noticed that those shadows, they started moving. It was like an entire demonic portal opened up in my room and the energy just went haywire. The first night was definitely the worst too. I felt really alone, I was really scared, I buried my face under my covers and somehow I fell back asleep. The next day I told my friends about it and they couldn't believe it. The exact same thing happened to them at the exact same time. We realized pretty quickly what that meant. We were now haunted by whatever this thing was, and we were, for the next 3 months or so, to wake up at that same site pretty much every single night. We even had a group chat going and would pretty much only communicate on it at 3 a.m. It was terrifying to say the least, and we really thought that it was never going to end. The third friend grew to resent us for a little while because she had only played with us that only horrible day, and honestly, I felt sorry for her. Anyways, this story does have a bit of a happy ending, sort of. The haunting came to an end one day after a very heavy rainstorm. Somehow, and I have no idea how, that board washed back up in my friend's backyard. But the weirdest thing is that it was completely put back together in the box, with hardly any water damage. That makes absolutely no sense, I know. But my friend kept it under the stairs in the basement for many years. We never hung out in the basement alone ever again after that. Eventually, she did something kind of, mean, I guess, but she left it at a friend's house after a sleepover. Pretty sure the girl doesn't even know that she has it, but after that, her basement didn't seem creepy anymore, and we never woke up at 3 a.m. to the site ever again, which, obviously, we were really relieved about. But after this whole experience, I promised myself that I would never mess with those things again. I cannot believe that they sell them in the children's aisle of all things. A few days ago, my girlfriend and I, a young 20s, were on the home stretch of a big road trip with our dog. As it had been a while since we last stopped, we pulled into a rest stop off of a freeway to stretch our legs and have Doggo take a dump. When we pulled into the rest stop, there were no cars and 3 big semi-trucks parked in a line. Immediately, my girlfriend got out to go into the next room. I leashed up the dog and stood next to the car, and as she was walking towards the entry door, I thought that I heard someone yell behind me. To my surprise, it was a trucker in the driver's seat of his truck with the window rolled down, trying to get my attention. Now, I'm generally a pretty friendly person towards all people, whether they seem shady or not, generally willing to help a hand. Behind me in the truck was an older gentleman, large with grey hair and sunglasses. His truck was so loud that I really couldn't hear what he was saying, so I yelled back, "What?" The trucker yelled something inaudible 3 more times as I asked him what, while shaking my head and holding up my heads to inform him that I couldn't hear him. At this point, he seemed visually annoyed that I said "what" 4 times. Okay, that's understandable. I wanted to see what the deal with this guy was, so I walked halfway between the car and his passenger side truck. "What did you say?" I asked. "Can you help me look for my phone? I lost it somewhere," the trucker said. At this point, I was super caught off guard, as this had all unfolded within the 20 to 30 seconds that we parked at the rest stop. To me, it was weird that a trucker was asking a random person stopping at a rest stop to help look for their phone, but maybe he just wanted me to call it. "Where did you lose it?" I asked. I lost it in my truck. Can you come up here and help me look for it?" The trucker replied in a really unnerving tone. In that moment, I was really sketched out. I thought that I was about to be abducted. Phone call I could do, but no way was I about to get into his trucker's cab to look for his phone. "Yeah, I'm good," I said sternly, but half-heartedly, as I almost thought that this guy was joking with me. After a few moments, the trucker then says, "You won't help me look for it?" My adrenaline was pumping, so I yelled back, "Get out of here," in a threatening tone, knowing that I had nothing to defend us should something go wrong. I put Doggo back in the car and pulled out my phone to pretend that I was calling the cops, while he slowly drove and then stopped again to ask if I was going to help. I then screamed again, "No, get out of here, I'm calling the cops." And after that reply, he stepped on the gas and exited the freeway. I stood and watched when finally my girlfriend exited the rest stop, wondering why I looked like I'd just seen a ghost. I don't know if it was an overreaction, but it sketched me out that he asked me to get into his truck like that.